Come on, give me something to shoot at. Hiccup muttered to himself as he watched the starry night sky intently, waiting for the infamous Night Fury to shoot the watchtower. Come on. Where is it? He whispered madly to himself as a faint whistle could be heard, and he straightened himself up and put his finger on the trigger of the bowler launcher in front of him, which he dubbed the Mangler. Stars started to disappear, then reappear in a matter of milliseconds as the whistle got louder and louder until... boom! In a flash of bright purple light the tower was destroyed, and with it, a shadow dashed past as Hiccup pulled the trigger and was knocked back as the bowler flew through the sky, and he instantly scrambled up and listened. Nothing. He missed. No. He muttered. Damn it. Hiccup screamed at the top of his lungs as he kicked the worthless contraption in anger before giving it the finger. Hiccup. A familiar voice screamed angrily as Stoic stomped up the hill, and Hiccup rolled his eyes in an exasperated manner. Okay. Fine. I don't care. Ground me for all I care. Hiccup hissed as he noticed Stoic's pace quicken towards him, and his angry scowl turned to a look of pure terror. Hiccup. Run. He screamed as Hiccup gave him a confused look. Why would I? Hiccup was cut off by being yanked violently off the ground. Ah! He screamed as he looked up. It was the Night Fury, the same Night Fury that he tried to shoot down. Hiccup. Stoic screamed as he threw his axe at the dragon, which it easily avoided. Son. He screamed desperately as Hiccup was being torn farther and farther away from him. Dad. Hiccup screamed only once before he was whisked away. No. Stoic stuttered, tears in his eyes as he watched his son, his only son, helplessly scream as he presumably fought against the grip of the reptile. He was going to die same way his late wife Valka did, whisked away, never to return. No. He said again, but this time angrier, firmer. This will not happen again. I don't care what it takes, I will get you back. Hiccup. Stoic hissed as he got up and walked back towards the village. Underscore 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 underscore. No. You have to take me back. Hiccup screamed nervously at the mighty dragon that was holding him. I might not look important, but I am. Do you want my Beidis father and tribe to kill you and all your friends, because they will? Hiccup threatened as the Night Fury gave off a noise that almost sounded like an amused snort. In their dreams. The Night Fury said. 2 hours later Hiccup was still trying to fight against the Night Fury's grasp. Just let me go. He screamed as the Night Fury landed on a small island and threw Hiccup harshly onto the ground before grunting and taking off. Really? Hiccup snapped as he looked around and ventured into the forest. Gods damn it, it's dark out here. Hiccup thought as he looked through the woods and finally collected enough wood to start a fire. He walked back down towards the beach and carefully put the sticks in a tiki-like position before looking around and cursing to himself. There was no way to light the fire. Need a little help there? The Night Fury asked as he landed near Hikyo and ignited the sticks with his purple flame before taking off again. Okawae. Hiccup said before shrugging and scooching closer to the fire and falling asleep on the sand. Underscore 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 underscore. The first thought in Hiccup's mind when he woke up was, darkness. It should be morning, why is it so dark? And warm. And comfortable. Good, you're awake. The Night Fury said as he poked his head through his wings, his acid green eyes almost illuminating in the dark. Ah! Hiccup screamed as the Night Fury let him crawl out of his grasp. I think a thank you is in order for not letting you freeze to death. He said as Hiccup looked down at the burned out fire. Did you just help me? Hiccup asked in shock as the Night Fury nodded. And you can understand me? Hiccup asked as the Night Fury nodded again. Whoa. We should definitely add this to the Book of Dragons. He said as the Night Fury gave him a confused look. What is a book? he asked as Hiccup started to pace around excitedly before stopping and looking around. Right. I'm stuck here, he muttered as the Night Fury grabbed Hiccup by the shoulders and took off. Here we go again, Hiccup said, annoyed as the Night Fury cut through the cloudy sky like butter. Underscore 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 underscore. So he was just taken? Gobber asked warily as Stoic sighed and nodded, tears forming in his eyes. That Night Fury just took him. No remorse. I thought I taught him a lesson by telling him what happened to Val, but he didn't listen, and now he's gone. Stoic muttered as he balled his fists up in anger. So when do you want to, have the funeral? Gobber asked, even more warily. As soon as possible. I want to kill that Night Fury as soon as possible, and I can't go without giving Hiccup a proper send-off, Stoic said as he got up from the table they were sitting at and walked away. Oh Thor and Odin, why the hell must you take everything away from him? Gobber said before getting up and following Stoic out. May the Valkyries welcome you. May they sing your name with love and fury. Hiccup. 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 The hooligans echoed throughout the harbor, where they pushed a little boat out to sea. A little horned helmet sat on a stone pedestal, like a king on his throne on the wooden deck. So we might hear it rise from the depths of Valhalla, so we may know you made it to the Hall of Princes. For a great boy has fallen, an inventor, an heir, a son, a friend. Gobber choked as a few people continued to say Hiccup's name, it ringing throughout the entire near-silent pier, shoving daggers into the hearts of many. Stoic, you should go first. Gobber sighed as he put a hand on Stoic's shoulder, before dragging it off to let the chieftain grieve. I promised this wouldn't happen again, I'm so sorry Val. Stoic choked as he picked up the bow and arrow laying near his leg and lit the bow on fire before shooting it with perfect aim at the little ship, igniting the bed of coals under the helmet, followed by about 100 more arrows from the other villagers that had good enough aim to actually hit the little boat. Flames licked the sky as the fire grew bigger and bigger until the boat cracked and was ushered beneath the waves and the village started to disperse. But Stoic stayed, he stayed for hours on end, just looking at the spot where the ship went down. The funeral ended 5 hours ago, it's time to go. Gobber sighed, but Stoic ignored him. Stoic, you can't stay here forever. Gobber said a bit more firmly as Stoic sighed. Why do the gods hate me? He muttered, tears splashing down his face as Gobber sighed and put a hand on his shoulder. They took everything away from me. My wife, my son, my family, gone. All by the hands of dragons. He said sadly with a clear undertone of anger. Stoic, these things happen, the best thing you can do is just let it sink in. You will feel better, eventually. He trailed off as Stoic shook his head. No, I won't. I regret everything I have ever done and said to that boy. I gave him disappointed look whenever I could, I always said the most hateful things I could possibly tell him, in hopes of making him stronger. But I was wrong. Do you want to know my last words were to him? What is he doing out again? Get back inside. Stoic mumbled as Gobber gave him a sad look. Well, you were being protective. You saved him from being burned to death and then sent him to the forge. If anything, it's my fault. I shouldn't have left the forge in the first place. I knew he never listens, but I didn't expect him to do something that dangerous. He said. This isn't any of our faults. It's that damn Night Fury's fault. Hiccup is dead. I have searched and searched for the last 15 years just for Valka. Now I have to find the most elusive, deadly dragon in the world, for my son. Stoic muttered. We have to find it. Gobber corrected as Stoic looked up at him and smiled. So, where do we start? Underscore 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 underscore. So, where exactly are you taking me? Hiccup asked the dragon as they flew through the misty sky. My home. He said. I wish I could understand you. he exclaimed as the dragon flew over an island and the mist cleared up and a sunny sky took its place. The island was a bit on the small side, a little bit smaller than Berk, but it was beautiful. Fields of lush green grass slowly turned into dense forest, which snaked up a rocky mountain with a strange amount of caves. As they drew closer, Hiccup noticed that shadows kept dashing around the mountains and the dragon swiftly flew into one of the caves and threw Hiccup inside before darting off. "Hey! Where are you going?" he yelled as another shadow sped into the cave. It was another night fury. It had dark blue scales and sky blue eyes, similar to Astrid's. It snarled as Hiccup stumbled back in fear and bolted behind a rock, but not before the other night fury pounced and pinned him to the ground. "What are you doing in my cave? I don't remember letting a dirty human come in." It snarled as Hiccup slightly whimpered as a blue flame started to from in the dragon's throat. Damn, saved then killed. This was one hell of a half a day. Hiccup thought sarcastically as he heard the beat of wings and the first night fury flew in, 2 fish in his mouth. "Sky, this is a human I took from an island in the archipelago when I was checking out one of the Red Death's raids. He's cool," he said as he threw the fish in front of Hiccup before breathing a little bit of fire on it, cooking it instantly. "Oh, thanks." Hiccup thanked as the first dragon gave him gummy smile. "Toothless. I could have sworn you had the dragon's teeth shot out of its gums," making Hiccup jump back. "Teeth? Toothless, huh? How about I call you Toothless?" Hiccup said as Sky laughed and the first dragon glared at him. "My name is Grayscale," he hissed as Sky continued to laugh. "And no, I think Toothless is a great name." She laughed as Grayscale glared at her. "Since I can't understand you, I'll just call you Toothless. My name's Hiccup," Hiccup said as Sky and Toothless both burst out laughing. "That's the stupidest name I've ever heard." Toothless laughed. "What? Do you have a brother named Burp?" Sky exclaimed. "Or a sister named Sneeze?" Toothless added cheerfully. "Hey Sky, can you go see if Snowflake has one of those draconian gems?" he asked as Sky nodded and flew out of the cave. "Suuuu, Toothless, where exactly are we?" Hiccup asked as Toothless bowed and gestured to his back, which Hiccup hesitantly climbed on. "Let me give you the grand tour of the Isle of Night," Toothless exclaimed as he burst out of the cave, Hiccup clinging onto his neck for dear life. "Woohoo!" he exclaimed as he dove through the sky and Hiccup screamed in terror. "Okay. So this is where nest meetings take place. So if we are going into battle with our rival nests, then this is where we talk about battle strategies," Toothless said as he gestured to a big plateau where a few other night furies sat, talking quietly to each other. "And this is the nursery. Come on, let's go look at a few of the hatchlings," he said as he veered down towards the big cave and landed at the edge, where a bunch of night furies stood, smiling widely and nuzzling their newborns. "Ooh!" Hiccup said as his heart literally melted at the adorable hatchlings running around, nipping at each other. A little dark grey one with snow-white eyes accidentally bumped into his leg, letting out a tiny yelp before looking at him, confused. "Get away from my hatchling!" a protective mother snapped as she tugged away the little dragon, making it whine and try to get back to Hiccup. "Mom! You had another hatchling!" Toothless exclaimed as the mother, who had bright red-orange, and very dark purple scales, laughed and nodded. "What can I say? Your father can't keep your hands off me," she said as Toothless grimaced in disgust as Sky flew into the nursery, a little black gem in her paws. "Here. This was Snowflake's last gem. It only lets him understand us, but that's good enough, right?" she asked as she threw Hiccup the stone, who just barely caught it and looked at it, confused. What is this?" he asked as he inspected the little black crystal. "Crystals and gems are the same thing, right? It lets you understand us," Sky explained as Hiccup jumped back in shock. Did you just talk?" Hiccup asked in shock as they all nodded. "Whoa," he said. "So Mom, this is your 6th hatchling. I feel like I've lost count." Toothless asked as his mother laughed and nodded. "Say hi to your oldest brother Winter," his mother asked as the little hatchling clumsily scampered over to Toothless and said, "Hi." "She can already talk?" he asked in shock as his mother glared at him. She hatched 5 months ago, she said, annoyed as Toothless awkwardly backed away. Oh, I guess I was at the Red Death's place longer than I thought, he said. And he brought back a friend, Sky added as she gestured to Hiccup, who froze. So, my son took you from a Viking tribe? She asked as Hiccup nodded. Burkham. Gem of the archipelago, except for the fact that it's raided almost every week, Hiccup said. So I see. Are you an important part of the tribe? Like best teenage sailor or best hunger with a bow? She asked as Hiccup nodded. Well, not any of those things, but I am the heir to Stoic the Vast, he said as they all gave him a confused look. Stoic the Vast? Who's that? Another person with a stupid name? Toothless asked. Grayscale. Toothless' mother snapped as she smacked Toothless on the head with her tail. Dusk, in his defense, the kid's name is Hiccup, Sky said as Hiccup gave Toothless a begging look. Can I still keep calling you Toothless? I just feel like it fits you better than Grayscale. You can make fun of my name all you want, my full name is Hiccup Horrendous Haddock III. Hiccup begged as Toothless and Sky both burst out laughing again as Duck smacked the both. There were 2 of them before you. Toothless snickered as Dusk glared at him. Watch it, she warned as Toothless nervously nodded. So anyway, who is this Stoic the Vast? She asked as Hiccup awkwardly rubbed the back of his neck. The chieftain of my tribe, he said nervously as Dusk, Toothless, Skies and a few other dragons within earshot eyes widened in horror as another Night Fury came from the mass of dragons and hatchlings as it tackled Toothless and pinned him to the ground. You did what? It snarled as Dusk tapped its shoulder. Tempest. She trailed off as he got off of Toothless, who dusted himself off. Yeah, nice to see you too, Dad, Toothless said sarcastically. You put our entire nest in danger. Why did you even take this runt from his home? Tempest snarled as Toothless looked around nervously and Hiccup sighed and wiped his eyes at the word runt. He tried to shoot me down with a machine he made. I was mad, Toothless snapped, making some of the hatchlings whimper, except for Winter, who crawled out of her mother's grasp and climbed up Hiccup's leg and perched herself of Hiccup's shoulder. Oh, hey there, he said as Winter giggled and licked his ear, making him flinch back in disgust. You, he said as he wiped off his ear and Winter jumped off his shoulder and onto his head, where her claws got tangled in his hair. Oh ow. No, let me just help you out, Hiccup yelled as Winter ripped her claws out of his hair, leaving his hair a messy disaster. Yeah, that's one way to do it, Hiccup said sarcastically as Toothless and Sky snickered. Wait a minute. Was that big guy that saw me take you? My dad? Yeah. Hiccup sighed as Toothless' eyes widened with fear. So I took the heir of a tribe, aka you, away from the chieftain, aka your dad, right in front of him. Oh gods, he muttered as Hiccup patted his head. I really didn't have much going for me there. Don't worry, I bet no one even misses me, especially my dad, Hiccup assured as Toothless gave him a look. Are you sure? Those 2 seconds where I saw your dad, he seemed pretty damn scared that you were about to be abducted by a Night Fury, Toothless said as Dusk glared at him. Language, she chided as Toothless rolled his eyes. So this is your little sister? Sky asked, trying to get them off the topic of Hiccup and Burke as she leaned down and looked at Winter, who sneezed and a little white plasma blast came out. Wait. Do all Night Furies have different plasma colors? Hiccup asked as he patted Winter's head. Nah, just blue, purple, white, and if you're an albino Night Fury, gold, but that's really rare, Sky explained as a roar could be heard in the distance and all heads perked up, their flaps as high as physically possible. The Southern Furies, Toothless muttered as Tempest and Sky burst out of the cave, followed by almost all the rest of the dragons. Only the mothers stayed, to protect their hatchlings. What's happening? Hiccup asked nervously as Toothless' pupils turned to slits. Southern Furies are our sworn enemies. They once killed the Alpha's son and daughter and we've been at war with them ever since, Toothless explained as he gestured to his back. You coming? Why you want me to help you? Hiccup asked in shock as a blast could be heard in the distance, along with more roars. Yes. Now are you coming or not? Toothless said impatiently. I don't know. Should I? He asked as Toothless annoyingly tapped the ground with his claws. It's your decision, Moran. He snapped as Hiccup nervously jumped onto his back and Toothless took off faster than a bullet, Hiccup holding onto his neck for dear life. Watch out. Hiccup screamed as a bright blue plasma blast was shot in their direction, making Toothless dive down and return a plasma blast to the offender, which was a Night Fury, about 4 times as big as Toothless, but it was also not as sleek and its scales weren't as dark, so it would be easier to see at night. Wait a minute. Toothless, head straight for that guy. Hiccup said as Toothless gave him an "Are you crazy" look. I'm not exactly suicidal. Toothless exclaimed as Hiccup shook his head. I know you could never take on that guy one-on-one, but if you use that guy's size against him, then maybe you'll have a chance. He said as Toothless got the idea and shot towards the big Southern Fury, who was just shooting a huge plasma blasts at the defensive Night Furies. Hey bitch. I'm over here. Toothless screamed as the big dragon whipped around and started to chase them through the mountains, which it clearly didn't know as well as Toothless. Must kill Northern Fury. The Southern Fury screamed as it shot random plasma blasts all over the place, making rocks shift and rattle at the tops of the treacherous mountains. He's wearing himself down. Hiccup exclaimed in joy as the attacker followed them until a dead end, where a big boulder loomed over them dangerously. Hang on. It's about to get bumpy. Toothless yelled as the Southern Fury roared behind them and shot a plasma blast towards them, which Toothless barrel rolled to avoid. The boulder then slipped from the force of the blast, forcing Toothless to dive down and shoot back out the way they came. Noo-oo-oo. The unfortunate dragon screamed as it crashed into the cliffside and was hit by the boulder, crushing him as they both hit the ground. Yeah. Hiccup exclaimed as Toothless smiled cheekily. That's the first Southern Fury I've ever killed. You are an amazing battle strategist. He exclaimed as Hiccup blushed slightly. Well, I'm just kinda used to watching the fighting from the sidelines, thinking of better strategies and techniques. But no one would ever listen. He sighed as Toothless gave him a sad look. It's okay. The nest doesn't exactly love me either. I once left my post at the nursery when there was an attack going on and they Toothless took a deep breath before continuing, destroyed one of my siblings' eggs. That's why my dad was so hard on me when we were playing with Winter and you told me who you were. He's still so disappointed in me after what I did. It's not every day you just forgive and forget something like that. But my mom, of course, was always supportive and kept trying to convince him it wasn't my fault. But it was. And now, thanks to my stupid mistake, I have one less sibling. He sighed as Hiccup patted him on the head affectionately. Yeah, my dad isn't exactly very proud of my actions either. He always blamed me for my mother's death, that if I was never born she would have never had to run into the house to save me and then be taken by a dragon. Also I'm a failed inventor, so that doesn't really help my case either. He said as Toothless let out a slight chuckle. Wow. We both have really depressing stories. Toothless said as Hiccup laughed. Yeah, I guess you're right. He said as they flew back towards Toothless and Sky's cave. Wow, I'm shocked that Southern Fury didn't kill you right then and there when you called it a bitch. Sky commented as she flew swiftly into the cave, licking a bleeding cut she had on her paw. Well, Sky Scale, we actually killed it. Toothless said in a matter-of-factly tone. You're joking. That guy was 4 times your size. Sky said as Toothless shook his head and smiled. We killed him. It was so awesome. Hiccup told me to use the guy's size against him and it worked. He exclaimed as Hiccup nodded. It's actually really simple. That dragon wasn't as small as Toothless, so he would have a harder time trying to slow himself down when going at full speed, so we just used that to our advantage. Hiccup explained. Whoa. I should recommend you to my dad. She said as he gave her a confused look. Her dad is the military commander for the nest. He basically plans when we attack or when the attacker come to us, what we should do. Toothless explained as Hiccup nodded. Hey, I guess military strategy is just in my blood. underscore 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 underscore. We head for Helheim's Gate, Stoic said firmly as the hundreds of warriors around him shifted uncomfortably. But those ships never come back. One man pointed out as Stoic clutched his knife so hard that his knuckles turned white. Do you think I care? My son is dead and I won't just turn back before we even start. He exploded as even the toughest warriors flinched back. Nothing was more terrifying than an enraged chieftain, especially their chieftain. Meeting dismissed. And you better come to the docks at dawn tomorrow, he said before every dispersed, except for Stoic and Gobber. Stoic, you can't be so hard on them. Most of them didn't even like Hiccup, let alone want to help find the dragon that killed him. Gobber said as Stoic just looked away. I blamed him. He trailed off, tears forming in his eyes as Gobber gave him a confused look. Blamed him for what? He asked. For Valka. I told him it was his fault that she died. He sighed as Gobber gave him a sad look. Stoic, don't beat yourself up. Gobber was cut off by Stoic standing up and walking out of the hall, not wanting to hear anything else Gobber had to say. Train the new recruits. We don't need another kidnapping. Stoic sighed as he walked out. Stoic, Gobber said in a childish tone of voice. I was once a warrior, chieftain, husband, and father. Then, I was a warrior, chieftain, father. Now I'm just a warrior and a chieftain, and I plan on protecting my people. You wouldn't understand, you're just a stupid blacksmith. Stoic hissed before walking out, leaving Gobber in a slightly worse mood than before. Stoic the Vast, you are a shell of a man. He sighed as he took a swig of his mead. No turning back. Astrid muttered as she entered the dragon training arena, the rest of the teens behind her. I hope we get some serious burns. Tough Nut exclaimed excitedly. Hey, I want some mauling. Like on my shoulder, or lower back. Rough Nut said as Astrid rolled her eyes. Yeah, it's only fun if you get a scar out of it. She said dryly as Gobber entered the arena, his usually excited and happy eyes were now determined and angry. In this program you will learn to face the 5 most common dragons on this island. I do not want any silliness. This is serious. He yelled angrily as the teens looked at each other in surprise. Gobber was almost never like this. Gobber, are you okay? Fishlegs asked warily as Gobber whipped around to face him, his glare burning into Fishlegs' very soul. Yes. I'm perfectly fine. All of you need to act more seriously. Do you want to end up like Hiccup? You need to defend yourselves from those evil monsters. Or else they'll kill you with a smile on their face. He snapped as they all flinched back before inwardly slapping themselves for not remembering. Gobber was like a second father to Hiccup. Now. Ready your weapons. He yelled as he unleashed the Gronkle, making the teens scramble around and dodge the Gronkle's molten blasts. Everyone. Get a shield. Astrid yelled as she dove for one of the many shields scattered in the middle of the chaotic battlefield. Hey. Get your hands off my shield. Tough Nut exclaimed angrily as he and Rough Nut fought over a shield with a skull on it. There are like a million shields. She yelled. Take that one. It has a flower on it, girls like flowers. He retorted as Rough Nut snatched the shield out of Tough Nut's hands and smacked him on the head with it. Oops, now this one has blood on it. She said in disgust as she offered it to him. Rough Nut. Tough Nut. Stop playing around. Gobber screamed in anger as they both scrambled up and grabbed 2 totally different shields before running back into battle. How many shots does a Gronkle have? He yelled. 5. Snotlout said unsurely. No. 6. Fishlegs corrected. That's enough for all of you. With 1 extra. Gobber trailed off as he looked away from the struggling teens and bit his lip. Ah. Fishlegs screamed as the Gronkle blasted his shield, making him run for cover. Rough. Tough. Watch out. Astrid screamed as she ran in front of the forever bickering twins and took Rough Nut's spear and threw it straight at the Gronkle, who was firing up a molten blast. Hey. Now how am I supposed to fight? Roughnut snapped angrily as Astrid turned to face her. Every in of her body screamed annoyance and hatred. I saved your lives. Spears are made by putting a sharp rock on a stick. It's not hard to make a new one. Astrid screamed as both of the twins flinched and looked at each other nervously. Astrid. Roughnut trailed off as she pointed to the Gronkle who was dive-bombing them, fire building its throat as Astrid held up her shield and was thrown back by the force of the blast before the dragon rammed into her, throwing her even farther back, and a snap could be heard as Gobba ran up to the Gronkle and yanked it back into its cage before running back over to Astrid. Ow! Astrid croaked as she trained to stand up, but a huge bolt of pain shot up her right leg, making her fall back down. Astrid, okay? He asked as Astrid groaned. I can't stand. I think it broke my foot. She muttered as Gobba looked up from her and at the other teens. Let this be another lesson for you. A dragon will always go for the kill. Underscore 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 underscore. Woohoo. Yeah. That's what I'm talking about. Hiccup exclaimed as Toothless landed in the cave and Hiccup jumped off, both of them excitedly shaking. That was awesome. I had no idea that you could go that fast. He exclaimed as Toothless smirked and sat down. Oh please. That was nothing. I just couldn't go any faster because you were holding onto my neck. I can create a sonic boom if I want to. Toothless said as Hiccup flopped down on the ground. Hey bud. Did I ever tell you how thankful I am for you taking me from Berk? He asked as Toothless rolled his eyes. 8 times. I've counted. He said as Hiccup laughed but then looked around. Hey. Where's Sky? Wasn't she flying right next to you? He asked as Toothless shrugged. I dunno. She's probably off training again. She needs to be the best teen in the nest. Toothless said. Whoa. That sounds exactly like Nevermind. Hiccup said as he shook his head and Toothless gave him a confused look. Exactly like what? He asked. Well, back in my old village, there was a girl that used to be my best friend. But then she became obsessed with being the best in the village and we just kinda grew apart. Hiccup explained. Oh duh. I'm stupid. How the hell did I forget to ask you? How old even are you? He asked. Oh, I'm 15, you. Hiccup asked as Toothless smirked as gave him a playful nudge. Same here. He exclaimed as Hiccup laughed. That's awesome. Immature teenagers for life. He exclaimed as they both high-fixed and Sky flew in with a mouthful of fish. What kind do you want, Toothless? Salmon or Icelandic cod? Sky asked as Toothless let out a slight growl of annoyance. I told you to call me Grayscale. He said. And I told you yes when you asked me to be your mate. Now choose, salmon or cod, she said in annoyance as Toothless rolled his eyes. Cod. He muttered as Sky threw him the fish, which he easily caught and swallowed in a second. Hey Tooth, can you cook this? Hiccup asked as he threw Toothless's salmon, which he shot an excitingly light plasma blast at, cooking it instantly. Hey. Softy. Mom told us that you kidnapped a human. A voice yelled as 4 night furies flew into the cave as Toothless rolled his eyes. I am not a softy. Toothless snapped as one of the night furies, which was a dark pale purple and had pale orange eyes, rolled her eyes. Yeah you are. Any of us would have killed that human without a second thought. She said. Hiccup, these are my siblings, Speedy, girl, Dark Moon, girl, Quicksilver, boy, and Acid, boy. Guys, this is Hiccup, my good friend. Toothless introduced, making sure to put emphasis on the word good as he pointed to the same night fury he was talking to before, a deep vivid purple one with sapphire blue eyes, a jet black one with silvery eyes, and another jet black one with eyes similar to Toothless, except they were a little more yellow. In that order. Good. You've only known each other for 3 days. Dark Moon said. You can make good friends in 3 days. Toothless stated. Oh, Mom also told us that you go by Toothless now. Quicksilver said as Toothless groaned and face-palmed before looking back up at his snickering siblings and nodded. Okay, yes, I go by Toothless now. He sighed. I can call you Grayscale if you want and it'll undo all of these Toothless jokes. Hiccup offered as Toothless shook his head and smirked. Nah, cause then I can't make fun of your name. Hiccup Horrendous Haddock III. Toothless snickered as Hiccup rolled his eyes and Toothless' siblings burst into laughter. Yeah, laugh it all up. You have no idea how stupid the names of some other teens in my village are. Hiccup said as Sky, who was still laughing, managed to give him a confused look. How much worse could they get? She snickered as Hiccup laughed. A lot. There is Fish Legs, Snotlout, a boy named Dog's Breath, but he was killed in a raid last year, and oh yeah. Rough Nut and Tough Nut. He said as they all continued to laugh. Do the parents in your tribe just hate their kids? Speedy asked. No, they just believe that hideous names can frighten off games and trolls. He explained. That is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Sky said. Yeah, our parents just name us according to our eye color, scale color, or something that will strike fear into the hearts of our enemies. Toothless said. Oh, that makes sense. Sky, Grayscale, Winter. Hiccup trailed off as they all nodded. We gotta bounce. It's our turn to go get fish for everyone. Acid said as they all waved by and fly away. Do they all just move and go in one small pack? Hiccup asked as Toothless shrugged. They are all within 2 years of each other. Winter and I are the oldest and youngest by a long shot. He explained as he looked at Hiccup, who he just realized was covered in dirt and filth. Do you happen to have a pair of extra clothing? He asked as Hiccup rolled his eyes. Yeah, like I was holding a pair of clothes when you took me. Even though I really wish I did have a change of clothes. I feel disgusting. Hiccup grimaced. Well, you aren't wrong. Sky added. There's a nearby village that we raid if we need to. You wanna go and steal a pair of clothes from there? Toothless offered as Hiccup gave him an unsure look. Are you sure? I don't really feel right stealing. He said. Come on. Stealing gives you a rush of excitement. And it's not like you're stealing money. It's just a necessary change of clothes. Sky said as Toothless nodded and Hiccup groaned and nodded. Okay, where is this village? He asked as the Night Furies both smirked and nodded. Now that's what I'm talking about. The village isn't far. It's about 20 minutes away. Toothless said as Hiccup jumped onto his back and the three of them took off, blending into the almost completely black sky. Okay, so first you wait until dark and then we land silently in the village, sneak around very quietly and then just grab what you need before taking off. Toothless whispered as they hid in the shadows of the forest surrounding the nearby village. Now we wait. Sky said as they watched the sun set over the horizon of the island. Birkin sunsets are better. Hiccup said as it finally got dark enough that they started to walk around the village, looking cautiously at the big hole in the center of town, making Hiccup sigh in remembrance. This town reminds me of Burke. He sighed, he was starting to get homesick. But the nest is awesome, right? Toothless offered as Hiccup smiled and nodded as his eye instantly caught sight of the forge, that no one was currently in. I'll be right back, guys. He said before running off to the forge, accidentally bumping into a few swords, making a loud clang as a man who was already walking towards the forge started running and Hiccup gasped in horror before diving for the back room. Who's there? He snapped angrily as Hiccup used his small size to his advantage and crammed into a basket in the room as the man yanked the door open, looking around suspiciously before slowly walking towards the little basket, making Hiccup whimper slightly, but then a roar could be heard outside and the man sprinted away, grabbing a sword as he did so. Yeah. Look at me. Toothless yelled as he shot a plasma blast at a tree in the distance as Hiccup stumbled out of the basket and looked around. He noticed a bag on a chair and grabbed it before looking around. There were pieces of scrap metal and hard leather. This could be useful. He muttered as Toothless and Sky distracted the man and Hiccup searched around the forge in search of more useful items, finding tons of scrap metal, lots of fabric, a needle and thread, a bucket, a pair of tongs, a hammer, a sword, a bow with some arrows, some coals, and even a few packs of dye. Hum. He muttered as he swiped all of it up before running back outside, gasping in horror as he watched about 40 people fend off Toothless and Sky, who were trying their best to fight them off as he ran towards them. Took you enough time? Sky snapped as Hiccup hastily ran through the crowd and jumped onto Toothless' back before taking off. Traitor! One man screamed as they all hissed at him, Hiccup looking down sadly. Don't let them get to you, Toothless said as they flew back to the cave. I know, but I can't just forget everyone and everything on Berk. I do feel like a traitor. He sighed. Hey. It'll be alright, Sky assured as Hiccup guiltily nodded. Yeah, I guess you're right. Hey. I forgot to ask. Why do dragons attack Berk? Hiccup asked. The Red Death tells them to. She's a beta dragon. Second ranking to the alphas. Toothless explained. Yeah, some of our best friends actually live in that nest, Sky said as they flew into the cave and Hiccup instantly started to take his stuff. He put a few pieces of coal on the ground and then put rocks around it, pulling a slab of rock near the fire pit. Hey Toothless, can you light this up? He asked. You probably want Sky to do it. Her fire is hotter than mine, Toothless said as Sky nodded and let out a controlled flame, leaving the coals smoldering as Hiccup blew on them, making it glow brighter. Okay, let's get going, he muttered as he grabbed the hammer and tongs and got to work, melting the metal over the searing flame before smashing down on it with the hammer. Hey, could one of you please go get some water? Hiccup asked hopefully as Toothless rolled his eyes and grabbed the bucket. I'll get it, he muttered before flying away, leaving Sky watching Hiccup in fascination as he pounded the metal. Underscore 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 underscore. The next morning Toothless and Sky woke up to the sight of Hiccup dipping a brand new chest plate in the bucket of water. He also had a new shirt on, which was hastily sewed together. It was dark green while his new pants were a dark brown. Hey guys. He yawned as he held up the chest plate and looked at it. It was dark grey and one part was dyed green with the Striker class symbol. You like it? He asked sleepily as he put on the chest plate and threw the bow over his shoulder and put the sword on his belt. You look badass, Sky said, impressed. Yeah, you got a whole vigilante look going on, Toothless said as Hiccup smirked. Just wait until you see this, he said with a grin as he took out the bow and latched an arrow, which looked slightly different from the ones that he snagged last night. He shot it and it hit the cave wall, exploding on impact. Whoa! Who'd you do that? Toothless exclaimed in shock. Well, I noticed that there was flint around the cave, and I had some steel, so I tied them together and made about 30 or so of these arrows, he said as they both looked at him, impressed looks on their faces. Oh! And Toothless, look what I made, he exclaimed as he held up a dark grey saddle that would completely blend into Toothless' scales. Cool, Toothless said, not as impressed. Now we can go as fast as you want, Hiccup said as he held up the saddle higher, Toothless' attention snapping over to him, an excited grin on his face. So why exactly did you make all this stuff? Sky asked. Because, I want to take down the Red Death. Underscore 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 underscore. Stoic stared determinedly at the thick smoke surrounding Helheim's gate. Bring us in, he muttered as the crewman nodded and the ship sailed into the thick fog. Hiccup has to be here, damn it, he muttered as they fog restricted his vision and they basically sailed blindly through the treacherous waters. Underscore 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 underscore. Well, I have nothing better to do. Astrid muttered herself as she stared at the Book of Dragons in front of her and opened the front cover. Strike class, fear class, yada yada yada, she said as she flipped through the pages. All of the dragons very different. Thunderdrum. Can easily crack a man's skull, ow. She muttered as she continued to flip through the pages, gruesome pictures of Vikings dying drawn on every page in every way imaginable. That was how many dragons were there. Kill on sight. Kill on sight. Kill on sight, she said as she flipped madly through all the pages. Night Fury, she muttered as she looked around cautiously, making sure no one was around. Speed, unknown. Size, unholy offspring of lightning and death itself. Never engage this dragon, your only hope, hide and pray it does not find you, she muttered as the nearly empty page burned so many questions into her mind. Hiccup. She gasped in horror. Sure, she didn't really like the young Haddock, hell, she hated him. But their old best friendship sparked pity in her brain as she imagined the brutal way that the little heir could have died. Mauled, burned, torn apart. Every single horrible way to die popped into her brain and she could only imagine the look of pure terror on his face when it went for the finishing blow. Poor kid, she muttered miserably. Why did she even stop being friends with Hiccup? He was a nice kid, smart, witty, and all around a good guy. So why did everyone hate him? I regret it, she muttered as small tears started to form in her eyes as she pushed the book away and got up, walking out on her crutches. Underscore 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 underscore. An attack on the Red Death. Are you sure, sweetie? A large night fury, about thrice as big as Toothless and Sky, asked. He had dark blue scales and golden yellow eyes with bits of sky blue in them. I'm sure, Dad. And it's not going to be on the nest, just the queen, Sky explained. So, can we do it? Hiccup asked hopefully as he put on his newly made riding helmet, which was the same type of material as his chest plate. I really don't advise it. She is a queen after all, Sky's dad said as Toothless gave him a begging look. Please Deathkiller, I had to, I've seen some of my friends suffer because of her reign. And Hiccup wanting to save his village pushed me over the edge, so can we please? I will die before I let anything happen to your daughter, Toothless assured. All right, fine, Deathkiller sighed as they all jumped up in joy. Thanks, Dad, she exclaimed before they all took off. Be safe, my little Sky Scale, he muttered before turning away and laying in the dirt. Astrid stood at the edge of the arena, deep in thought as she looked at the others, scrambling around desperately, trying to avoid the Nada's hot flame and spikes. She tried to focus on watching them, but something in the back of her mind pushed her train of thought onto what she read in the Book of Dragons. Night Furies are really smart. So why did it go after him? Out of all the strong warriors it went for the weakling, she muttered as she sighed and leaned on the railing, thinking about how her and Hiccup used to be best friends. Underscore 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 underscore. Come on, I wanna show you something, a young Astrid said as she ran through the forest, Hiccup lagging behind. Wait up. I can't run that fast, he yelled as Astrid giggled and ran faster. Oh come on, he yelled as she jumped over a rock and exclaimed. Tada! We're here. Hiccup finally managed to catch up to her and gasped in shock at what he saw. It was a sky blue baby Nada with light yellow highlights around its wings and tail. Oh, he said as Astrid smiled and patted it on the head. Her name is Stormfly, she said as Stormfly nuzzled her hand. She's so adorable, Hiccup exclaimed as Stormfly squawked in joy as she ran past them both. Where are you going? Astrid yelled after her as they followed. Stormfly, come back, Hiccup yelled as they jammed their feet into the ground, both gasping in horror as Stormfly squawked happily. In front of them was a mother deadly Nada. Ah! They both screamed as the two kids sprinted away as fast as possible, the mother chasing after them furiously. Daddy! Hiccup screamed as they could see the village nearing. Mom! Astrid added as they finally ran past the tree line and were within earshot of the village. Help us! They both screamed as people's heads whipped around to see the two little kids being chased by the angry Nada. Almost instantly, everyone sprung into action, grabbing swords and axes as they ran at the dragon, which hissed and flew away as Hiccup shielded Astrid with his body. Hey, are you alright? Ingrid, Astrid's mother, said in concern as she ran over to them. Why yeah. Hiccup stuttered as Stoic pushed his way through the crowd and ran up to them. Hiccup! What were you thinking? I told you not to go into the forest. He snapped with overprotective rage as Hiccup winced back slightly. I know, but Hikyo couldn't finish his sentence because Astrid had elbowed him in the ribs. Don't tell him. I'll get in trouble. She snapped quietly as Hiccup shakily nodded. I mean. Yes, I shouldn't have done it. He sighed before Stoic glared at him, took his hand before walking away. Bye Astrid. He said in a sheepishly friendly tone of voice. Bye. Astrid returned, feeling awful. Underscore 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 underscore. I can't believe that was 9 years ago. Astrid muttered as she leaned on her crutches and looked back down at the Nada. It seemed so familiar. Wait. She said, snapping up. Stormfly. She exclaimed as she watched the Nada attack her friends. It was Stormfly, she'd know that dragon anywhere. Oh my gods. She muttered, an excited grin plastering her face as Gobber finally ended the training and forced her inside the cage. Underscore 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 underscore. Dad. Can I go hunt for trolls? Another young Hiccup asked. He looked slightly older than before but not by much. What no? Trolls aren't real. Stoic said firmly as Hiccup frowned. But Gobber said they are. He said they steal his socks and I don't want my socks to be stolen. We need to annihilate the troll population before they take every sock on Burke. He exclaimed proudly as Stoic chuckled at his son's enthusiasm. Okay, we'll go hunting for trolls. But first I need to finish this paperwork. He said, gesturing to the pile of paper in front of him as Hiccup nodded and walked up behind him to snoop on his work. Berserker tribe visit. No. Dager almost drowned me once. He said it was a new game he's invented. Hiccup said with annoyance in his voice. Hiccup. Do you mind? Stoic asked as Hiccup shook his head. Not at all. He said smugly as Stoic rolled his eyes and got up, putting down his pencil and grabbing his cloak from the closet. So are we going to hunt for trolls or not? He said as Hiccup's eyes sparkled with excitement. Yes. He exclaimed as he ran out the door at light speed, Stoic having to grab his vest, he was in such a hurry. Come on. The trolls aren't going to find themselves. Stoic. Hiccup yelled, making Stoic give him a confused look. Don't call me by my first name. He said. Stoic. Hiccup screamed again, Stoic actually getting slightly angry. Stop calling me by my first name, young man. He snapped. Stoic. Wake up. Underscore 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 underscore. Stoic snapped awake and looked around. He was in his cabin on the ship. You kept talking about Hiccup and trolls in your sleep. Spitaloot said as he got up and looked around. How long was I out? He dared ask. A day or so. A dragon attacked and slammed into you at full force. Remember? He asked as Stoic shook his head. Not at all. he answered as Spitaloot curtly nodded and walked out. A dream. It was just a dream. He reassured himself as he got up and put on his helmet. Underscore 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 underscore. How stupid are you? Toothless yelled as the Red Death chased him, Hiccup, and Sky around. I wasn't thinking. I'm a goddamn moron. Hiccup snapped to himself as the Red Death shot a huge stream of fire at them, which they barely dodged. But really, how far does your stupidity go? You even planned a sneak attack, getting her more and more angry by the minute. But instead you go and shoot an arrow straight at her eye. Sky screamed as the Red Death swiped at them. I wasn't thinking, goddammit, I already told you. He screamed as they all started to go into a nosedive towards the island. Well, it's now or never. Hiccup muttered as Toothless and Sky gave him unsure looks as gas started to build in their throats. Trust me, he said as they whipped around to the Red Death. They were barely 1,000 feet above the ground before they shot 2 plasma blasts straight into her jaw throat, making her scream in pain before she hit the ground at full force. Toothless, Sky, and Hiccup flying safely out of the way as fire erupted everywhere as the trio flew away safely, until the smoke cleared. Then Hiccup steered Toothless back towards the island and grabbed something out of his bag, his old clothes. What are you doing with those? He asked as Hiccup started ripping them apart, taking the pieces and organizing them into a picture. A sloppy picture of a Night Fury. Why'd you do that? She asked as they took off again. So if the Birkins ever find this islands, they'll know I was here, and if I'm still alive will be a mystery. He explained. Yoo-hoo, I see. Going with the confusing route. They won't know what happened to you, smart. Toothless admired as they flew back in silence, congratulating themselves inwardly for their accomplishment. A beaten-up old ship slowly docked at the coast of Dragon Island, the Birkin ship. Stoic jumped off, followed by a few other men as they started to walk around curiously, noticing some dragons flying around, but they weren't attacking. Keep your guard up. Stoic said as they all nodded before walking around, weapons in hand. Stoic. A man yelled as he instantly whipped around and ran towards him. What? What is it? He asked expectantly before his jaw dropped along with everyone else's. It was the Red Death's charred corpse, dried blood caked all over her body and rotting flesh slowly starting to fall off of her deceased body. And that's not all. The man said as he pointed to the Night Fury made of clothes as Stoic inspected it curiously before his jaw dropped and pure rage washed all over his body. A D-Dragon couldn't do this. It was a M-man-tha that K killed Hiccup. He said, his voice wavering because of the sheer amount of anger. We need to find that Night Fury. And that damned Dragon Rider. He screamed as the others held their weapons high and cheered in acceptance. Underscore 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 underscore. Wow, it must suck pretty hard to have a broken leg, huh? Ruffnut said as she walked up to Astrid, who was reading the Night Fury page of the Book of Dragons over and over, trying to get even the slightest bit more information about the elusive species. Yeah, it really does. She responded as Ruffnut sat down next to her and squinted her eyes, trying to read the text. Unholy offspring of lightning and death itself. Hey Ast, why are you reading about Night Furies? She asked as Astrid glared at her. First, what have I told you about calling me Ast? And second, because of Hiccup. The book said itself that even the toughest of Vikings shouldn't engage them. So why would one go and kill the most scrawny kid in the village? It just doesn't add up. She muttered as Ruffnut gave her a shocked look. Whoa, you just got deep. But hey. Why question it? That annoying runt is gone and we actually have a chance at surviving winter. Ruffnut exclaimed as Astrid glared at her before slamming the book shut and walking out with a pissed expression. Well, someone's being a little bitch today. She muttered before looking through the book herself, mostly just to look at the pictures. underscore 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 underscore. Can you say hiccup? Hiccup cooed as Winter looked at him and squeezed her eyes shut, trying to force out the word as Toothless and Sky watched in anticipation. She could say almost everyone's names in the nest except for Hiccup's, probably because it was a human name and not a dragon name. Cup. She managed to force out as Hiccup patted her on the head. Sorry Squirt. You didn't get it. He said as Winter pouted. Hiccup. She asked again as a huge smirk creeped its way onto Hiccup's face. Yes. You did it. He exclaimed as Winter gave him a gummy smile. Yeah. She exclaimed as Toothless and Sky smiled. Here, Hiccup, can you watch her for a minute while we get some fish? Sky asked as Hiccup nodded and started to play with Winter, feeling the rush of wing behind him as the mates took off. Hiccup. She said again as he smiled and scratched her behind the ear, a sweet spot he'd found when trying to scratch an itch for Toothless. There you go. He smirked as he felt a wind brush up onto his back. Sky and Toothless are back already. He thought to himself before Winter let out a terrified scream as he whipped around to see a huge southern fury, its blood-red eyes striking fear into both the youth's hearts. Stwang a danger! Winter screamed as the huge dragon roared, making Hiccup dive for Winter and narrowly saved her from a deadly swipe of a claw. You killed our pack leader, young one, my own father. Now you shall feel my wrath. It screamed as Hiccup's eyes widened in horror before he grabbed Winter and ran off the cave's ledge, which was a good 500 feet above the ground. Ah! They both screamed as Hiccup threw her up into the air as she desperately tried to flap her wings. Actually started a decent glide before stumbling onto the ground, and Hiccup, well, he didn't have the same luck as he tumbled through the air before finally crashing into a tree and then onto the forest floor. He moaned in pain as he watched Tempest and Dusk snatch up their hatchling while Toothless and Sky started attacking the apparent heir of the Southerns. She's safe. He muttered before his eyes slid shut and he slipped into unconsciousness, blood oozing out of his foot like a waterfall. Underscore 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 underscore. Hiccup. Winter screamed as Dusk and Tempest safely guided her into their cave. What about him? Dusk asked kindly as tears started to form in Winter's eyes. He saved me. He have no wings. Fell into trees. She wept as Tempest and Dusk looked at each other nervously. Did he save you? Tempest asked as Winter started bawling. Yes. He get hurt saving me. She wailed as plasma blasts flashed in the background as the rest of the southern pack arrived and all the northerns started to defend their home. Oh no. Grayscale and Sky are going to be devastated. Dusk muttered as Tempest's expression darkened at Toothless, or Grayscale's, name. He left her alone. He screamed in anger as Dusk shook her head. No, this isn't like the time with our unborn Fireheart. Hiccup was with her. He saved her life. We are indebted to him. She said as Tempest started to calm down before looking over at Winter, who was still sobbing. That doesn't change the fact that Grayscale almost let another of our hatchlings be killed. He snapped as Dusk gave him a stern glare before walking over to Winter and comforting her. Just go out and fight. She said harshly before wrapping her tail and wings around Winter, Tempest glaring at her before flying out. Underscore 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 underscore. Astrid carefully walked through the village, making sure to not be seen as she neared the training arena. Okay, free Stormfly, make 6-year-old me happy. Come on, it's a moral thing to do. She muttered under her breath as she quietly opened up the 2 gates and walked inside, hearing the dragon's snores as she neared the Nadder cage. Fear started to crawl up her spine as her hand moved to the lever before she ignored the terror in her body and opened up the cage to reveal the Nadder, who was sleeping soundly, and Astrid quietly shuffled in before sitting down next to her and petting her head, making her snap up and growl. "No. Shhhhh. It's me, remember me? I found you in the woods almost a decade ago," Astrid said as the Nada gave her a quizzical look before her eyes snapped open in shock before Nuzzle Astrid, who giggled. "Stormfly. You've gotten so big," she exclaimed quietly as Stormfly squawked in happiness. "Come on, let's get you out of her," she said as Stormfly nodded, and they began to carefully and silently walk out. Once they reached the final gate, Stormfly instantly flew away, but not before licking Astrid on the cheek, making her grimace. "Maybe, not all dragons are bad," she muttered before walking home and silently crawling into bed. Underscore 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 underscore. Astrid walked out of her house the next morning feeling good. Freeing Stormfly was a good deed for her. Instead of watching everyone attempt to take out the Zippyback, she decided to go for a walk in the forest because, why the hell not? About half an hour into walking, a snap could be heard from the bushes as she whipped around to see a Gronkle, growling at her before it attacked, making her desperately try to run away, but running away isn't very easy while on crutches. "Ah! Son of a bitch!" she exclaimed as she tripped on a tree root and fell to the ground, the Gronkle pinning her down as she tried to crawl away. Death. The single word that was on Astrid's mind as she saw orange start to flow in the back of the beast's throat. Until a familiar squawking could be heard and Stormfly swooped in, knocking the Gronkle off of Astrid as she snarled in anger, the Gronkle roaring back as they started on fight. The Gronkle shot a ball of molten rock that Stormfly narrowly dodged before she flew up and whipped her tail spikes at the Gronkle, making it roar in pain before retreating. "Why, you saved my life," Astrid stuttered as Stormfly nodded and nuzzled her. "Thank you," she said as she warily put out her hand, Stormfly looking at it cautiously before leaning her horn into her palm. "Stormfly, you are amazing," she said as Stormfly smiled and nudged her before taking off, Astrid looking at her back curiously. "Astrid Horferson, Dragon Rider," she said before shaking her head and laughing, continuing her walk through the forest, having the comfort of knowing Stormfly will come and protect her if needed. "Come on Toothless, let's get you inside," Sky said as Toothless coughed and haphazardly flapped to their cave. "It stings," he muttered as Sky looked under his wing to reveal a large gash. "Okay, well you should probably take a break from flying for a few days. Hiccup'll understand," she said as Toothless perked up at Hiccup's name. "Oh yeah, where is Hiccup anyway? Wasn't he watching Winter?" Toothless asked as Sky shrugged. "I dunno. Maybe your parents know, I'll go ask them," she said as she flew out the entrance and Toothless curled up into a ball, awaiting the whereabouts of his best friend. Underscore 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 underscore. Dusk. Tempest. "Do you know where Hiccup went?" Sky asked as she flew into the cave, where Winter was crying into Dusk's wing, Tempest sitting on the side, ignoring them. "Hiccup?" Winter bawled as Sky gave her a confused look. "What about him?" she asked, fear creeping into her voice as Dusk sighed and looked at her. Well, I'm just going to be straight with you, no sugarcoating." "Got it?" she asked as Sky nervously nodded. "Okay, well when Hiccup and Winter were in your cave, a southern fury snuck in and it killed him?" she asked as Dusk shook her head. "Not exactly. Hiccup grabbed Winter and jumped off the edge of the cave, he threw her in the air and she started flapping before Tempest and I sped by and saved her. But Hiccup fell into the forest and we have no idea what happened to him," she said as Sky's eyes got wide. "Are you telling me that a human jumped off a 500-foot ledge? That's..." Sky trailed off, "That's a fatal fall. You should go tell Toothless." Dusk sighed as Sky sighed and nodded. "Why yeah," she muttered before flying off. underscore 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 underscore. Hey Toothless, Sky said as she flew into the cave sadly, Toothless perking up. So, where's Hiccup? He asked as Sky gave him a sad look as he got the hint and he backed away in denial, shaking his head as he did so. How? He was here for 4 seconds. He screamed. He and Winter were attacked and as a last-ditch effort, he jumped over the edge and saved Winter. Your mom said he landed somewhere in the forest, but he might not be dead. There's a chance that he's still alive, just wounded. Sky rationalized as Toothless instantly fly out the cave, flapping around with difficulty before crashing on the ground. Toothless! Sky exclaimed as she dove down and landed next to Toothless, who groaned and looked up to see a small trail of blood. Hiccup! Toothless muttered as he followed the trail for about 10 seconds before skidding to a halt before staring in shock at Hiccup, who was unmoving, blood caked around his twisted foot as Sky resisted the urge to vomit and Toothless sprinted over to him and out and ear on his chest and heard a faint beat. He's alive! Toothless exclaimed. Maybe not for long. Let's get him back. Sky said as she picked Hiccup up and flew to their cave, Toothless flapping after them as Hiccup made a slight groaning noise before his eyes opened slightly. Sky? He asked feebly as they landed. Yeah, it's me. And what were you thinking? She snapped as Toothless flew in. Toothless? He asked as Toothless smiled and nodded. Thanks for saving Winter, my dad would have killed me. He joked as Hiccup laughed slightly, before the laugh turned into a cough. Well, the good news is that your foot doesn't need to come off, but it is broken, badly. Sky said as Hiccup sat up weakly. That's good, except for the fact that you don't have any medical supplies and I don't have any medical skills. He said. So what should we do? Your foot could get an infection and actually need to get amputated. Toothless said. We could try that village again. Hiccup piped up. But they know your face. Sky said. Oh. There's that other village a bit farther away that is at war with the first one. They probably know nothing about you. Toothless offered. Okay, cool, what is the tribe called? Hiccup asked. Terra, Sky said. Okay, yeah, I'll go there, except for the fact that I can't walk. You can't fly me in, and Burke knows that village. If they figure out who I am, we're screwed. He said. We'll just give you a stick as a crutch, land as close as Dragonly without being seen, and have they ever even seen you? Sky snipped. Well no. But my dad and their chief, Bringer, are good friends and he probably knows a lot about me. Hiccup sighed as Toothless looked around before smirked and picking up a black coal from the fireplace and rubbing it in Hiccup's hair, who flinched back. What did you just do? He asked angrily as Toothless held up the chalk. Hair color is a very distinguishing aspect of humans, like scale color for us, so if we change your hair color. Toothless trailed off. Then that decreases the chance they'll know it's me. Toothless. You're a genius. Hiccup exclaimed as he finished putting the charcoal in his hair and jumped onto Toothless' back. Okay, let's go. He exclaimed as Toothless sighed. I can't fly for the next couple of days, I got hurt in the fight. Sky'll have to take you. He sighed as Hiccup patted his head and nodded before carefully crawling onto Sky, making sure not to bump his foot. So about how long is it going to take riding bareback? He asked as Sky shrugged. I dunno, maybe 40 to 50 minutes. She estimated. How about with a saddle? Hiccup asked. Probably about 20 minutes to half an hour. She said as Hiccup leaned over and grabbed Toothless' saddle off his back before taking off quickly. Underscore 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 underscore. Stormfly. Stormfly. Where are you? Astrid screamed as she limped through the forest. Her crutches had been taken away but walking was still a little shaky. Stormfly. She screamed again before sighing and slumping down next to a tree. What am I doing? Meaningfully betraying my village for a dragon that'll probably never show up again. I'm a goddamn idiot. She screamed as a shadow flew overhead as she quickly gripped her axe, until a familiar squawking could be heard and Stormfly landed right in front of her, smiling happily. Stormfly! She exclaimed as Stormfly cooed and nuzzled her. I'm sorry for having no faith in you. It's just been a week and... She trailed off as Stormfly squawked happily. Yeah, it was a stupid thought. She said as Stormfly bowed her head and Astrid got the hint and warily jumped onto her back. Okay, now wait. She screamed as Stormfly took off quickly, flying happily over the island, Astrid clinging to her neck. Stormfly! Slow down! She screamed as Stormfly quickly opened up her wings and ascended above the clouds and flew calmly through the orange sunset. Wow! She muttered as Stormfly purred before flying even higher, lazily gliding past snowy mountains and low grassy valleys and thick forests. This is amazing! She muttered as Stormfly landed in the forest near the village. It was nearly night now and the sun was dipping under the horizon as Astrid jumped off. Stormfly, thank you. That was the single greatest experience of my life. And I promise I will never hurt or kill a dragon again. She said as Stormfly roared happily before Astrid scratched her neck and she purred in content before Astrid ran off and Stormfly flew away. Underscore 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 underscore. Just drop me off right there. Hiccup said as Sky landed at the very edge of a forest and Hiccup's eyes darted around before he gestured for Sky to back off and he carefully got off of her and used their amazing stick as a crutch as he limped into the village. Be safe. She called after him. I will. He said as she ran into the forest, using her dark scales to her advantage as Hiccup limped through the village, trying to find someone who could help him when his eyes landed on a girl that looked about his age, with hip-length chocolate brown hair that was tied into two braids and stormy grey eyes, and was carrying a sword. Excuse me. Hiccup said as the girl's attention snapped over to him before she gasped in shock and sprinted over. Oh my gods. Are you okay? She asked with concern as she looked at his foot. Not exactly, can you please show me to the healer? Brenner. She said as Hiccup nodded and she put his arm her shoulder. So, what's your name? Brenner asked. Hi Ryder. Hiccup said. Well hey there Ryder. What brings you to the Terrian tribe? She asked as they limped along a dirt road towards a big hut. I was shipwrecked on a voyage and they washed up on this island with my foot in this condition. He lied. Oh, well that's too bad. Where are you from? She asked quizzically. I'm a traveler, I don't really live anywhere, ever since my mom was killed by a dragon and my dad left me in the wild after he blamed me for it. He said, telling the semi-truth. Rough life. You know, I could ask my dad if you could stay here, on Terra. Brenner offered as Hiccup shook his head. No, it's fine. And who's your dad? Please don't say Bringer. Please don't say Bringer. Please don't say. Bringer, chief of the village. She said as Hiccup nodded and he felt his heart rate increase. Well, we're here. Brenner said as they walked into the hut, where a plump woman instantly walked over to them. Brenner, who is this? The woman asked as she looked at Hiccup, whose eyes darted around nervously. This is Ryder, this is Helga, my mom. Brenner said as the woman held out her hand, which Hiccup shook. Pleased to meet you Ryder, how about you have a seat right over there? Helga said as Hiccup sat down on a table and Helga looked at his leg. Broken. Okay, how long have you had this injury? About 5 or 6 hours. Hiccup replied as Helga walked over and started to mix a few things together in a bowl before walking back over to him. This is going to need surgery, there's something stuck in there that could give you an infection. She said as she handed the bowl to Hiccup, who eyed it cautiously. Drink that, it'll make your body numb so you won't feel as much pain. She said as Hiccup warily drank it before a strange sensation flooded throughout his body and everything went numb. Okay, now I'll just take these and pull out whatever is stuck in there. Helga said as she took a pair of large tweezers and grabbed hold of something sticking out of his foot. This still might hurt a little, so bite down on this. She said as she handed Hiccup a piece of leather, which he instantly bite down on with all his strength. As Helga pulled the object out, she then ran to wash it off to reveal one of Winter's scales. How'd that get in there? He thought as Helga gasped in shock. This is a Night Fury scale. They are our greatest enemies. She screamed as everyone else in the ER gasped as Hiccup bit on his lip and looked around sheepishly. You lied to us. Tell us the truth. Brenna, give me your sword. Helga snapped as Brenna unwillingly handed her mother the sword, which she put up to his neck. Go get your father. Helge snapped again as Brenna looked at Hiccup's terrified expression before sighing and shaking her head. No. She said as Helga glared at her and Hiccup let out a sigh of relief. Mom, he's just a kid. Brenna, we have a zero tolerance of traitorous acts. It doesn't matter what age the person is. She snapped as Brenna bit her lip and ran away. Now, who are you, really? Helga said as she held the sword at right up to Hiccup's neck, the cold metal chilling his skin. I already told you. My name is Ryder. A Night Fury must have came up to me when I was unconscious. He said. No. Because you didn't seem shocked when it was pulled out. Are you an ally of those devils? She hissed before her eyes got really wide and she pressed the sword so close that it drew a bit of blood. Ow! Hiccup yelped. We just got news from one of our allied tribes that their heir was just brutally murdered by a Night Fury. Are you or are you not the killer? Helga snapped with such fierceness that it put Toothless Snarl to shame. What tribe? Hiccup stuttered, terrified of the answer. Burke. She said as Hiccup groaned, of course. Well, I didn't do it. He said as Brenna walked back in, now accompanied by a large man with shaggy dirty blonde hair and piercing grey eyes. Is this the kid who likes Night Furies? He snapped. Brinja, this is Ryder. Helga said as Hiccup looked around desperately. You look familiar. Brinja said as Hiccup closed his eyes and tried to shield his face. Sure, he didn't look much like his father, but enough to tell that he was his kid. Strange thought. Anyway, kid, don't make this any harder on yourself, do you or don't you live with Night Furies? He said as Hiccup sighed. Yes. He muttered as Brenna gave him a shocked look. And did you or didn't you kill the heir of the Birkins, Hiccup Horrendous Haddock III? Brinja said as Hiccup shook his head. No, I did not. He said. Even though it is high treason to live and train dragons, you are not an actual part of this tribe, so I will not order your execution, but I will have to arrest you. He said as Hiccup sighed. Okay. He muttered. Helga, I'll take it from here. But I do want you to give him a cast for his foot. Brinja said as Helga begrudgingly put a cast on Hiccup's foot as he limped after Brinja, Brenna helping him. Did you really kill that kid? She whispered quietly into Hiccup's ear. No, I honestly didn't. He whispered back as they walked up to a little prison cell, where Hiccup walked in sadly before Brinja walked away, Brenna staying. I'm really sorry, in my opinion, dragons really aren't that bad. She said as Hiccup perked up. Really? He asked as she nodded. Yeah, I don't see why we need fight them, well, the 3 times a year they show up. Brenna sighed as Hiccup limped up to her. There really isn't a need. They just raid because they start to run out of supplies for winter. He said as Brenna looked at him in fascination. Whoa, what other things are there that we don't know? She asked as Hiccup smiled. Oh, you have no idea. He said as Brenna leaned closer. First off, they are kind, amazing creatures. Underscore 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 underscore. Astrid looked over a small cliff at the docks, where a single beaten-up ship sailed into the harbor, the Birkin ship. Oh gods! She muttered as she walked the men jump off, and even from up there, Stoic's viscous glare still gave her a bad feeling. Hiccup wasn't killed by the Night Fury, he was killed by a man. Stoic muttered to Gobber, who gasped. But didn't you watch him get taken away by a night fury? He said as Stoic gripped his axe angrily. Yes. It must have had a rider. He snapped as Gobber flinched back. Well, did you at least find the nest? He asked. The nest in ruins. That rider was there. It killed the queen dragon and then left. This. Stoic said as he reached into his pocket and grabbed a piece of Hiccup's shirt from his pocket. Something sinister is going on under our noses, and I'm going to find out what. He snarled before storming off. Something sinister. Astrid muttered as she limbed out the cliff, using ledges to get closer. If Hiccup was murdered, then why would that cloth have no blood on it? She muttered before her eyes got really wide. Unless. Hiccup sighed and looked down at his foot in disgust. He'd been in the cell for over 2 days and more than one problem popped into his head. First off, Toothless, he might be able to fly right now and might coming looking for him. Second, Sky, was she still on the island? Awaiting his return. And third and probably most problematic, Brenna. She had visited him 4 times since he'd been thrown in this hellhole and he could tell Brenna had to increasing cautious coming down here. I'm such a moron, what was I thinking? Hiccup was cut off by the sound of metal sliding on metal and he looked up to see one of the ground slid him the gross prison food. A piece of stale bread and a cup of river water. Eat up, scum. The guard hissed as Hiccup mimicked his lips in a childlike manner. Yeah, and make sure to put the fresh yak butter right next to the warm bread. He muttered sarcastically before grabbing the bread and throwing it into the wall, the sound ringing off the wall like wood on metal. You done with your temper tantrum yet? A familiar voice asked as Hiccup looked up to see Brenna leaning on the bars as Hiccup got up and walked towards her. Brenna, you gotta stop coming down here. Your dad's gonna find out and then bam, we're both in jail. He said as Brenna rolled her eyes and shrugged. Dad may be a wise and powerful chief, but things always go over his head, especially things like where his daughter went. She said. Well then what about your lunatic mom? Hiccup asked as Brenna huffed. Why do you care if I get caught? She asked impatiently as Hiccup rolled his eyes. I care about everyone. Even if I just met them or if they are even my worst enemy, I would hate to see them hurt or killed. Except for those southern furies I told you about. They are the whole reason my leg is messed up and that I had to jump off a 500-foot cliff. He exclaimed as Brenna let out an amused snort. Well, that little Winter was lucky to have you around. She said as Hiccup sighed. Tell me about it. Oh no, I bet she's worried sick. He muttered. Toothless probably told her you were still alive. But you never answered my question about how you can understand them. She said as Hiccup took the gem necklace off his neck and handed it to her. It lets me understand Dragonese, their language. I keep asking me to bring it to the snowflake girl that they got it from, but every time I ask Toothless says it's not important. Hiccup said before sighing. This thing is so cool. I wonder how this snowflake girl got it. She muttered before throwing it back to Hiccup, who caught it and put it over his head and onto his neck once again. So, what are we gonna do? She asked as Hiccup shrugged. I dunno, if you can break me out I mean that'd be great, but for you to get the key, you'd have to ask for it and then it'd be obvious that you set me free. He sighed before leaning on the bars himself. Ryder, I want to join you with the Night Furies. Brenna sighed as Hiccup's attention snapped up to her. What? He exclaimed in shock as she shushed him and nodded. I hate it here. I have no friends, I'm too creative for my own good, and I hate the violence here. And where you live, it seems so amazing. Adventure and action around every corner and tons of loyal friends. Just the one question that remains is, will you let me be a vigilante with you? Be another Night Fury rider? She said as Hiccup mulled it over in his head. I don't know. You have to be willing to live on the edge. Sure, it definitely has its perks, but you're away from all human contact. And you can't go flying back to your old village whenever you want. This will be the last time you see your family. Are you okay with that? He asked as Brenna sighed and nodded. Yes, yes I am. She muttered as Hiccup nodded. Sneak me out at midnight. We can use Sky's dark scales to our advantage. He muttered as Brenna nodded and walked away as Hiccup slunk back into his cell. Oh, and here. Brenna said as she turned around and rolled a jar of something and some gauze under the cell bars. It's some disinfecting cream and a roll of gauze, to make sure that foot of yours doesn't become infected. She said before walking off. Thanks. He muttered under his breath before opening up the bottle of disinfecting and taking off the old gauze. Underscore 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 underscore. Hello Astrid. Welcome back into the ring. Gobber exclaimed as Astrid walked into the arena behind the rest of the teens, her axe hung loosely in her hang. Thanks Gobber. She said half-heartedly. Okay. So today is our second shot at the Gronkle. He exclaimed as the other teens groaned as Astrid perked up, her interest piqued as she thought back on the things that calmed Stormfly down. What was that scratch that Stormfly liked? Oh. On the neck then under the chin. She thought before smirking as the Gronkle burst out of its cage, snarling viciously as Astrid ran up to it and it sniffed her curiously before she scratched its neck and chin, making it purr affectionately. Good dragon. She muttered as the others looked at her in shock. So I really gotta go. She said before running out quickly, everyone's eyes following her. Underscore 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 underscore. Astrid excelled in dragon training, as everyone expected, but not in the way they expected. Instead of brute force she used the tricks she learned from training Stormfly to make it look like she was succeeding. Even though she was just being friendly. But one thing still nagged at the back of her mind, something that she used up all the spare time not with Stormfly or at training about. What happened to Hiccup? She had a pretty good feeling he wasn't murdered in cold blood. And if Stoic was almost positive that the Night Fury had a rider and there was no blood on the clothes, then what does that mean? Is Hiccup actually no? Well maybe. Astrid was at a roadblock. She just needed one more piece of evidence to prove if he was either dead or alive. Hiccup's journal. The reason being that if his journal had anything about Night Furies, then that would mean he meant to come in close contact with one. Why else would he write about them? Damn it, how am I gonna get it? Astrid asked herself as she leaned back in her chair before an idea popped into her head, not a good one but at least it was one. I need to figure this out now. I'm sorry Chief, but your house is getting broken into. She sighed before looking outside. Dusk, perfect. Underscore 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 underscore. It's go time. Astrid muttered as she looked outside. It was around midnight and she quietly snuck out her front door and ran across the village before slowing down at the Haddock household. Come on, you need to know. She snarled to herself quietly before peering inside one of the windows. This was Hiccup's room. Everything was perfectly organized, which made her job that much easier. Okay, 3, 2, 1. She counted down before using a thin piece of metal to pry open the locked window before she snuck inside. Astrid opened the drawers carefully and quietly, finding things like pencils, notebooks, a knife, his journal. Wait. His journal. Jackpot. She muttered under her breath before opening it up and flipping through the pages before settling on the last entry, written 2 days before Hiccup was taken. The 17th of September. Dear Journal, this may be the last sad entry I'll write. I finally completed my latest invention, a bowler launcher I dubbed, the Mangler. And I'm going to shoot down the one, the only, Night Fury. I'm going to be a village hero. Anyway, until next time. HHH3. He missed. That's why that dragon took him. She exclaimed a bit too loudly as she heard footsteps come from down the hall as she quickly snatched up the book and bolted out the window as Stoic barged in. Who's there? He demanded before running up to the open window and looking outside as Astrid pinned herself to the side of the hut, hoping, praying that Stoic wouldn't notice her. Lousy wind. he muttered before slamming the window shut as Astrid let out a sigh of relief before sprinting home. If all dragons are like Stormfly, then he must have did something to gain its trust. She muttered as she stared at the ceiling of her room. And now he'd like a vigilante. I have to find him, she said before sitting up and sighing. What was she thinking? He could be on the other side of the world for all she knew. Okay, I just need to wait. Hiccup, I'm going to track you down, she muttered before falling asleep. Underscore 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 underscore. Bren, are you 100% positive about leaving? Hiccup asked as Brenna opened up the cell door with the key she innocently asked for. How many times do we have to over this rider? Yes, I am, she said as Hiccup limped out, some of the other prisoners yelling for the guards. The traitor has escaped. The heir is helping him. Less than a minute later, 5 guards rushed towards them as Hiccup made a very loud, high-pitched whistle as a roar came from the distance. What did you just do? Brenna asked as Hiccup smirked as pointed to Sky, who was now streaking across the sky towards them. What took you so long? She asked before shooting a plasma blast at one of the guards as about 10 more showed up. Oh, you know, getting arrested for being a traitor, you know, normal stuff, he said before jumping onto Sky's back, who was just as out to take off, until another purple plasma blast shot through the air and Toothless landed, snarling angrily. You guys were gone for 2 days, he snapped as Hiccup jumped onto his back. Sorry, got held up, he said as Brenna looked at him nervously as Brinja ran up and pushed her back. Brenna, run, he snapped as Brenna gave him a begging look. Sky, grab her, Hiccup said as Sky nodded and grabbed Brenna, who let out a scream. Brenna, Brinja screamed desperately as Hiccup sighed. Shhhh, Sky's not gonna hurt you, he assured as Brenna caught her breath and looked up at Sky, who gave her a gummy smile. Okay, now that we're all good, tell me who you are, really, she said as Hiccup looked around. You swear that you won't tell anyone, he said as she nodded. Toothless, fly down by the water, he said as Toothless flew down to the ocean before he dunked his head under, making the charcoal come off before he flew back up. I'm Hiccup, the kid who everyone thinks is dead. Whoa, 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 wait. You're Hiccup, Brenna exclaimed as Hiccup sighed and nodded. Yeah, I really didn't want to come to any villages, but since I hurt my foot, I had no choice, he sighed. But if you aren't dead, then we can bring you back to your father. Oh, that'd be great, she exclaimed happily as Hiccup let out an amused snort before shaking his head. He's probably happy I'm dead, now he doesn't have that annoying fishbone of a son, Hiccup said darkly. Don't think like that, Brenna said sternly as they flew into the cave and Hiccup jumped off of Toothless' back, wincing slightly as he accidentally knocked his bad foot. Yeah, how many times do I have to tell you? You are awesome and your dad looked really scared when you were taken, Toothless assured as Sky smirked and flew out of the cave. Where's she going? Brenna asked as Sky flew back in, someone flapping behind her. Hiccup, Winter exclaimed as she tackled Hiccup and covered him in a thick layer of saliva. Hey Winter, I'm glad to see you too, he giggled as Winter plopped herself onto his chest. You alive? She exclaimed as Hiccup gently pushed her off before standing up and brushing himself off. Oh, she's so adorable, Brenna said as Hiccup stood next to her. Yeah, she really is. Here he said before taking the gem off of his neck and handing it to her. Testing 1, 2, 3. Sky joked as Brenna jumped back on shock. Did she just talk? Yes, Toothless answered as Hiccup laughed and Brenna's jaw hung open. See, I told you you could understand them with that thing on, he said before Winter nuzzled him again. So what should we do now? Brenna asked as Hiccup carefully jumped onto Toothless' saddle as he gestured to Sky. You wanna go for a flight? He asked as Brenna laughed and nodded. Yeah, I do. underscore 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 underscore. Astrid walked down to the docks with Rough Nut and Fishlegs as they watched Trader Johann's ship pull into the harbor. Yoo-hoo. I can't wait. Johann said he was going to get a botany book just for me. Fishlegs exclaimed as Rough Nut rolled her eyes. Don't get you panties in a wad, fishy, she said as Astrid gave Fishlegs a slightly sympathetic look. He had been teased a lot more lately thanks to Hiccup disappearing, and she honestly felt like it wasn't that fair. They walked up to the small boat and met up with Tough Nut and Snotlout, who were both looking at weapons. She's so beautiful, Tough Nut muttered as he hugged a mace that he was holding. I think he's gone insane, Snotlout muttered to Rough Nut, who shrugged. Macy, I love you, he exclaimed as Astrid giggled slightly as Fishlegs eagerly ran over to Trader Johann, who handed him a book as he squealed in delight. Wow, I think he's lost it, Tough Nut muttered, still stroking his mace as Snotlout raised his eyebrow in confusion before shaking his head as Stoic walked to the ship, Astrid's interest peaking. Ah, well, if it isn't Stoic the Vast, my favorite chieftain, Johann said as Stoic sighed and shook his head. Yes, enough with the formalities. Do you have my sword? He asked as Johann nodded and grabbed a beautifully crafted sword from behind a box. Here you go. I had to travel all the way to the edge of the archipelago and fight it from a gang of pirates, he exclaimed as Stoic sighed and nodded, trying to be polite. So, do we want to meet in the Great Hall to discuss news around the archipelago? Stoic asked as Johann nodded readily. Yes, I will meet you there, he said as Stoic walked away as Astrid smirked. Hiding in the Great Hall is a breeze. If there is a rider, he'd be the first one to know about it, she said quietly before slipping away from her friends and sprinting straight into the Great Hall, where she then hid behind a few barrels and waited for the chief and trader's return. A few minutes later they both walked in and Astrid listened intently. Unfortunately, do you know the heiress of the Terrain tribe, Brenna? Johann asked as Stoic nodded. It sounds familiar. She's the daughter of Brinja, right? He asked as Johann nodded. Well, it appears that 2 night furies and a rogue vigilante have abducted her right in front of Brinja's eyes, poor lad, he said as Stoic's eyes widened. When Hiccup was killed, the night fury took him right in front of my eyes, he muttered, his fists balling in anger as Astrid smirked. Terrian tribe. Got it, she thought to herself before sneaking out of the hole and running into her house, grabbing a bag and stuffing things like a knife, a few notebooks, a few pencils, a map and a rope before running out of her house and whistling for Stormfly, who landed in front of her before she sighed. Am I really doing this? Maybe he really is dead. Astrid sighed as Stormfly cooed and nuzzled her. Yeah, you're right, she said before tying the rope around her stomach and jumping onto her back, gripping the rope as she tapped Stormfly's side, making her take off. Okay. Due southeast, Astrid muttered as she and Stormfly flew through the puffy white clouds. Underscore 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 underscore. Hiccup. Hiccup. Mommy. Daddy. Look. Winter exclaimed as she haphazardly flew into her parents' cave, Toothless not far behind, Hiccup on his back. How did you survive that? Tempest asked, not showing even the slightest amount of happiness that Hiccup was okay. I dunno, I crashed into a few trees, he said unsurely. I'm sorry about him. He's been very cranky lately, Dusk said, shooting a quick glare in Tempest's direction, who glared at her back before looking over to Toothless, snarling slightly. I can't believe you, he said angrily as Toothless looked around, confused. You left Winter on her own. She almost died. I can't believe you left another one of you siblings unattended during an attack. Have you learned nothing? He screamed as Toothless pinned his earplates to his head and whimpered. I didn't know there was going to be an attack. And besides, I didn't leave her alone, Hiccup was there. He said as Tempest continued to glare at him, a bit of white glowing on his head and in his nose before Dusk gave him a stern glare, making the glow disappear. It honestly wasn't his fault. Hiccup vouched as Tempest glared at them before looking down at Winter, who was running around Hiccup's feet. Okay, well Winter just dragged us over here so I think we should go. Toothless said as Hiccup nodded and jumped into his back. Hiccup. Don't go. Winter pleaded as Hiccup sighed. I'm only a few caves down. You can visit whenever you want. He said as Winter gave him a cheeky grin before Toothless flew back over to their cave, noticing it was empty. Hey. Where's Sky and Brenna? Toothless asked, looking around. Oh, they wanted to spend a bit more time flying around. Hiccup said before, lo and behold, Sky and Brenna flew up to them. Hey Hiccup. You'll never guess what happened. We saw another dragon rider. Brenna exclaimed as Hiccup and Toothless both gasped in shock. What really? Toothless exclaimed. Yeah. And Stormfly was the dragon. She found a human. Sky exclaimed. Wait. Did you say Stormfly? Hiccup asked. Yeah, why? Sky asked as Hiccup squealed in joy. I knew a dragon named Stormfly. She's a sky blue and gold deadly netherite. He asked as Toothless and Sky both nodded. And get this, her rider was from Berk. Brenna said as Hiccup's jaw dropped. Berk. That's impossible, it's a bloodbath over there. Toothless said. Brenna, what exactly did her rider look like? Hiccup asked, getting more and more anxious. Oh, she said blonde hair that was tied into a braid. She was wearing a spiked shirt. Oh. And she had the prettiest ocean blue eyes you could dream of. Does that ring a bell? She asked as Hiccup's jaw smashed into the floor. Astrid. He muttered. Well you better hurry up Romeo because she looked like she was going back to Berk. Sky said as Hiccup instantly jumped onto Toothless and shot out of the cave. Come on, come on, come on. Hiccup muttered as Toothless flew as fast as he could, Hiccup feeling the wind rush harder and harder until Stormfly came into view before Toothless accidentally shot right past her. Sorry. He yelled as he opened his wings as far as possible and they slowed down as Stormfly flew up to them. Grayscale. Whoa, great to see you. Stormfly said as Hiccup and Astrid made eye contact. Hey Horferson. Long time, no see. He. You son of a bitch. Astrid snapped as she threw a punch straight at Hiccup's nose, blood cascading down his face like a waterfall. Hey. What the hell was that for? He exclaimed, trying to stop the blood flow. For making everyone on Berk think you are dead. She snapped. Yeah, like anyone cares. He muttered. Like everyone cares. Hiccup, your dad is crazy about getting you back. He thinks a rider killed you. And he's hunting your dragon down now. She exclaimed as Hiccup and Toothless both exchanged nervous looks. And worst off, you can't just go kidnapping heirs to tribes. Now that entire Terrian tribe or whatever is probably after you too. Astrid snapped as Toothless fly back slightly, ready to bolt if Astrid tried to make a move to hurt Hiccup. Hey. Brenna wanted to come live with the Night Furies. And besides, it's not like I had anything going for me on Berk. Everyone hated me. Hiccup snapped back. Pfft, more like everyone misses you. When we had your funeral the entire village was just so somber and depressing for the next 2 or 3 days. Just because of your genius plan to stay away from your home. She said as Hiccup's expression softened. They were really that sad? He asked. Yeah. Astrid responded, her expression getting a bit softer as well. Oh. Hiccup trailed off, rubbing his arm nervously as Astrid started to calm down. Wait a minute, if you trained a dragon. Are you an outcast? He asked. No. I just snuck away. I would never allow myself to be outcasted from the village. She said as Stormfly leaned over to Toothless and whispered. She might as well be. She was talking about becoming a vigilante to avoid killing dragons. I think she has a slight crush on Hiccup and it's hilarious. Stormfly whispered as she giggled slightly. We might as well set up a love triangle now. Brenna looks like she's falling for Hiccup too. Toothless whispered back. Suuuu, do you wanna come with us to the cave? It might be a bit cramped but it'll be fine. Hiccup said as Astrid shrugged and nodded. Sure, but is that girl I just met gonna be there? She asked. Brenna, yeah, why? He asked as a bit of disappointment showed on her face, but she tried to hide it with an obviously fake cough. No reason. She said as Hiccup gave her a slightly concerned look before shaking his head and leading Astrid towards the Night Fury nest. Hey Storm. Long time no see. Sky said as they both flew in. Hey Sky. How long has it been? 5 minutes. Stormfly joked as Hiccup and Astrid both jumped off their dragons and walked over to the fire, where Brenna was cooking a fish. Oh. Hi, my name's Brenna. We didn't exactly formally meet back there. Brenna said as she held out her hand, which Astrid shook. Astrid. She said as Hiccup looked at the rope around Stormfly's stomach and then looked down in thought. Hey Astrid, do you need me to make you a saddle? He asked as Astrid looked at Stormfly before looking back down in thought. Sure. She said as Brenna piped up. Could I get a saddle too? Oh, yeah sure. He said before looking over at the pile of scrap metal and hard leather in the corner. I'll get to work on them right away. Hey, do either of you mind if there's some metal detail in them? I don't have quite enough leather. He said as the two girls shrugged and nodded. I'm cool with that. Astrid said as Hiccup nodded and grabbed some of the leather and got to work quickly as Astrid and Brenna went on a flight. Underscore 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 underscore. Dear esteemed dragon hunters. Hello, my name is Stoic the Vast, chieftain of Berk, and we have a dragon problem among us. A few weeks ago my son, Hiccup Horrendous Haddock III was abducted by a Night Fury and killed by a rogue rider. Then, 2 weeks later, the daughter of Brinja, chieftain of the Terrain tribe, was also abducted by the same man. I would very much appreciate it if you would help take out the rider and his dragon. Your expertise has been known far and wide and we believe that you could help with this problem. Stoic and Vast and the Isle of Berk. We were given that by Trader Johan after he came to our base. A man with a bald head and a small beard and mustache said to a man who was turned around in a chair. A Night Fury. Riker, go get a boat ready. We're heading to Berk to get more information from this, stoic man. The man in the chair said as Riker nodded. Whatever you say Viggo. Riker said as he walked away and Viggo leaned back in his chair before throwing the note into a bin. We'll finally find that Night Fury nest. And then we can sell their hides and bones for a fortune. Viggo said to himself, a huge evil grin on his face. And then afterwards. The island of Berk will be our new base of operations. Underscore 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 underscore. Hey guys, have you seen where Astrid went? Snotlout asked as he ran up to the twins and Fishlegs, who both shrugged. Last time I saw her on Johan's ship. Is she missing? Fishlegs asked, slightly nervous. Or maybe she was just playing hide and seek and no one's looking for her. Tough Nut stated, as if obvious. Anyway. I was snooping around in her room. What the hell? Perv. Rough Nut snapped. Not creepily. I mean, I found this. He said, pulled out Hiccup's little notebook. Why would she have that in her room? Fishlegs asked as he opened up the little notebook and flipped to the last page and read it carefully. Maybe the rider found out. Oh no. He said before whining slightly as Snotlout snatched the book out of his hands. Oh please, like the rider would know that she was curious about useless. He scoffed. I dunno Snotty, people can have eyes and ears everywhere. Rough Nut said spookily. Yeah, even the people you least expect can be traitors. Tough Nut added. None of us are traitors and Astrid is still missing. Do you think Stoic knows? Fishlegs asked. Well, she missed dragon training this morning and yesterday, so Gobber knows. Maybe he told Stoic. Snotlout offered. Or maybe she was the one who freed the deadly Nadder and she's on an epic quest trying to find Hiccup, who might actually be the rogue rider, and they meet up with that other girl from the Terrain tribe and then they form a little group of vigilantes. Tough Nut said quickly as the other three just rolled their eyes. Yeah, sure, Tough. And next I won't be the one to kill the nightmare. Snotlout said sarcastically. Okay, let's get serious again. We need to find out where she went. Fishlegs said before looking around and spotting Stoic and Gobber, who were talking quietly. Stoic had an angry glare on his face while Gobber was talking slightly frantically. Well, ye see, Astrid's missing. Gobber sighed as Stoic's knuckles turned white as he clenched his fist in anger. Damn rider. Good thing I sent that letter out to the dragon hunters. He muttered. Well, we don't know if it's the rider yet. Maybe she's just lost her way in the forest. Gobber offered up, but Stoic didn't take it. Demon Rider, is that a good name for that? I don't even want to say man. More like beast, or devil. Hiccup was taken by a devil. Stoic said as Gobber just sighed and looked away. When's he gonna get his damn mind straight? Not everything's about the rider. He thought as Stoic huffed and walked away from him. Underscore 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 underscore. Suuuu, Brenna, what do you wanna do? Astrid asked awkwardly as she and Brenna flew through some puffy clouds. I dunno. Wanna see if Hiccup's done with the saddles? She asked as Astrid shrugged. He's probably not done yet. We've only been gone for about half an hour. She said as Brenna nodded and they continued to fly in an awkward silence. This is the most awkward flight ever. Stormfly whispered to Sky, who nodded. Yeah, it's like Hiccup needs to hear to not make this awkward. She whispered back. Hey, what is that? Brenna asked as she pointed to a small ship on the beach of the island. Astrid flew down a bit closer to get a better look before gasping, flying down closer. What? Who is it? Brenna asked as she flew down closer and gasped as well. It was a shipwrecked man, who wore a very yellow dirty tunic and dark brown pants. He looked around 15 or 16 and had raven black hair that went down to his shoulder blades and bluish teal eyes. Ah! The man screamed in horror as Brenna and Astrid landed near him. It's okay, we're here to help. Brenna assured. Are you too? Dragon riders? Yes. But it just goes to show how kind dragons really are. All you need to do is earn their loyalty and then they will be your best friend for life. Astrid said as the man calmed down a bit. So, what's your name? Brenna asked as she jumped off of Sky. Talon. He said nervously, showing them a little claw on his left index finger. Hi Talon, my name's Brenna and her name's Astrid. Brenna introduced. And these are our dragons, Stormfly and Sky. Astrid said as Talon looked at Sky and Stormfly nervously before Sky gave him a toothless smile, which made him laugh slightly. You two don't look like you've lived with dragons for your entire lives. What village are you from? He asked as Brenna and Astrid exchanged nervous looks. We'll tell you if you tell us what tribe you're from. Astrid said. Oh, I'm from the mainland. I was taking a quick sailing trip and then a storm blew me up into Viking territory. Talon explained as Astrid gave him a suspicious look. Then how can you speak Norse? She asked. Oh, I know tons of languages. Norse, Latin, Greek, and English. He said. Oh, well in that case, I'm from Terra and her and our other friend who's in the nest are from Berk. Brenna said as Astrid shot her an angry glare before pulling her to the side. Why'd you tell a complete stranger where we're from? How do we know this guy isn't just a bounty hunter or something? She yelled as Brenna huffed. It's called earning someone's trust. You could try it. Brenna whispered back. Oh yeah, and Stormfly doesn't count. Why? Astrid counter-argued. Because she's a dragon. Brenna snapped. You know I could just get off the island myself. Talon said as Brenna shook her head. Not a chance. Here, Sky, and I can give you a ride to our cave. She said as she jumped on Sky's back, Astrid huffing in annoyance. Sorry Brenna, but I'm siding with Astrid on this one. Sky said. Come on. Please. I'll scratch that part of your neck that you like. Brenna begged as Sky sighed and gestured to get back, where Talon warily got on. Let's go. She said as Sky took off, Astrid shaking her head in disagreement. I'm not being paranoid, right? She asked Stormfly, who shrugged. All I'm worried about is my growling stomach. She said as Astrid smiled and rolled her eyes. I bet you're hungry. Let's just get back to the cave so we can eat. Astrid said as Stormfly squawked in approval as they took off. Unknown to Brenna, or Astrid, or even Talon. A shield washed up onto the beach from Talon's boat, a shield with the Dragon Hunter crest on it. It had been a day since Talon washed up on the shores of the Isle of Night and Brenna was very friendly with him. Hiccup and Astrid on the other hand, weren't as trusting as Fast. Astrid just said there was a bad vibe coming off of him and Hiccup is just wary about a random man washing up on their beach. Hey Brenna, can we talk? Hiccup asked as Brenna turned around to face him. Sure Hiccup. What you need? She asked as he looked around before grabbing her arm and leaning in. Look, I know you have a very friendly personality, but you shouldn't have told Talon absolutely everything about us. I just get an uneasy vibe from him, and so does Astrid. He said as Brenna scoffed. Why are you two so against him? He's just a harmless man who got lost. She snapped. Brenna. I just don't trust this guy. Hiccup said as he calmed himself down before sighing and looking back up at her. Just keep an eye out. He sighed before jumping onto Toothless and flying off. Don't worry, I don't really trust him either. He said as Hiccup shook his head and laid down on his back. Yeah, why is she so defensive of him? Is there something we don't know? He asked as Sky shot past them with Brenna, who shot him a viscous glare in the half a second they locked eyes. Hiccup. We need to talk. Astrid said as she flew up to him on Stormfly. What is it? He asked as she looked around nervously. I was on a flight with Stormfly and I saw a ship filled to the brim with dragons. They were in cages, being tortured. Those bastards were dragon hunters. And they are heading towards Berk. She snarled. My dad. Shit. He muttered. And guess who else is gone? She said rhetorically. Damn it. Astrid, stay here. He said before Toothless darted towards Berk. They needed to beat the ship. It didn't matter that he and Toothless were wanted, but the traitor had to get disposed of. Underscore 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 underscore. 10 pretty boring hours later they finally dart across the night sky over Berk. They knew Astrid and Stormfly were coming, but Stormfly was significantly slower than Toothless and they didn't expect to see the duo for about 3 or 4 hours. Okay, let's just wait this out. Hiccup muttered as Toothless perched himself on a cliff overlooking the village. He sighed as he looked at the bustling village. Home. What are you thinking? Toothless asked with an undertone of scolding. No, gods no, I definitely wouldn't go down there. But I've been thinking. They keep dragons in cages to be used during training. Maybe, just maybe, when the coast is clear we can break them out. He said as Toothless thought about it before looking at the sky. Okay fine, but let's make it quick. He said before they took off towards the village silently. Underscore 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 underscore. They landed silently outside the ring before Hiccup ran over and pulled the levers to both the doors open, allowing himself and Toothless inside. The dragons in the cages stiffen up as they hear footsteps before going crazy and snarling. Dirty humans. Once we get our hands on you. One of them threatened as Hiccup and Toothless looked at each other before rolling their eyes. Hey, we're here to bust you out so keep it down. Toothless Whisper yelled as the dragons instantly became quiet before Hiccup ran up to the cages and opened the hatches. The dragons instantly bolted out before looking around. "Hey?" the Gronkle asked, looking around curiously. "Where's Stormfly?" she asked. "Oh, she's coming, another girl already set her free," Hiccup explained as the dragons inspected him curiously. "Why do you look familiar?" one of the Zipply backheads asked. "You who?" "I know. Pick Sharpshot," the terrible terror exclaimed as I zoomed around and accidentally smacked into Hiccup, who had the wind knocked out of him as he struggled for a breath. "Hey! Watch where you're going, kid," Toothless snapped. "But I know why he looks so familiar. He's the chief's son," Sharpshot exclaimed as Hiccup finally regained his breath and backed away from the snarling dragons. "If he was really like his dad, then why would he be a dragon rider?" Toothless questioned in Hiccup's defense. "Yeah, I'm not a Viking. I'm not one of them," he said as the dragons looked at each other before back at Hiccup. "Hey! Who's there?" a voice snapped as 4 torches started to run at them before Toothless snarled and shot a plasma blast at the chains above them before they instantly flew out and Hiccup looked down curiously before gasping and pinning himself to Toothless. "The rider!" Snotlout exclaimed as Fishlegs squealed in terror and the twins high-fived. "We found him!" Ruffnut exclaimed as they all quickly flew away, taking refuge in a cove about 10 miles away from the village. "Damn it! Damn it! Damn it!" Hiccup screamed as he smacked his head up against the rock face that surrounded the cove. "Hiccup! Slowly giving yourself brain damage will do nothing. They didn't see your face, that's a good thing though," Toothless said. "I know, but then they'll probably tell my dad, then when the hunters get here, they'll know we're on the island, and if we go back to the nest, one of them might follow. Then we'd put the entire Northern Fury population on the line," Hiccup exclaimed nervously. "Okay, wait just a second. So we all know Grayscale a bit from the raids, and how he lives in his own nest with Sky. But why in Thor's name are there dragon hunters chasing you?" the Gronkle exclaimed. "Well, apparently, we need to get our alliances in line," Hiccup hissed, thinking about Brenna and her stubbornness as Toothless looked at the shimmering stars sadly. Since their riders were kind of annoyed with each other, Sky and him haven't really talked that much. Hiccup noticed the look on his friend's face and sighed. "Sorry, you and Sky can't be together just because Brenna and I are fighting," he sighed as Toothless smiled and shrugged. "Hey, when you know you can't have something you want it more. That easily describes my feelings about Sky. I just hope she feels the same way back," he said as Hiccup grinned and punched his wing softly before looking back up. The other dragons were gone. Hey, the duo didn't exactly blame them. They probably were pretty uncomfortable and they were free now. "Well, Astrid and Stormfly both probably landed and are going to sleep. Perhaps we should do the same," Hiccup said as he walked over to a well-hidden corner of the cove as Toothless nodded and followed before wrapping his wings around the boy and falling asleep. Underscore 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 underscore. Brenna and Sky both cautiously watched as Talon boarded one of the hunter ships and shook hands with one of the men. Riker to be exact. Dragon hunters, no wonder Hiccup and Astrid were so wary of him. Sky said as Brenna tapped her side and leaned down. "Come on, let's get a bit closer," she whispered as Sky silently took off and flew over the starry sky, a bit too starry because some of the men looked up and easily saw stars being blotted out and then reappear again. "Viggo, should we take a shot?" Riker asked Viggo, who stared at Sky before grinning. "Yes, finally we will have a Night Fury," he smirked as Talon's eyes narrowed. "Serves that annoying boy right for not trusting me. He was too smart." His train of thought was broken when someone shot an arrow that just barely hit Sky, who then spun out of control as Brenna was flung off her back like a rag doll as she screamed in horror before smacking into a nearby beach, sand exploding up around her before she came to a skidding halt as blood dripped down her face and she felt a horrible aching pain in her left arm. Sky," she muttered as Annette grabbed Sky and pulled her onto the boat. "Brenna." Talon gasped as he ran to the side of the ship and looked at the dark beach at the faintly moving girl. "Brenna." I'll be right there. Sky screamed as the hunters wrangled her, but not before she shot a single huge plasma blast in the sky, her distress signal. She looked at Brenna laying limply on the beach before sighing. Odin, I beg of you that someone finds her. She muttered as she was muzzled and chained before being thrown into a cell as men cheered from the main deck. We've done it. We've captured a Night Fury. Hiccup eyes fluttered open as Toothless jumped up excitedly, making Hiccup face plant into the dirt as he looked up at his friend in annoyance. Ow! He yelped before rubbing his cheek and noticing Astrid hunched over a fire, Stormfly standing next to her as she threw Toothless a fish. Hey, you made it. Hiccup said happily as Astrid looked at him and smiled. Like you expected otherwise. She said. That is 100% true. He laughed as Astrid handed him a cooked fish. Thank you, milady. He thanked before taking a bite. We were up all last night. She groaned as Stormfly nodded. Yeah, we got here around sunrise. We could have rested but we wanted to get here as soon as possible. She added. Yikes, you know the hunters probably won't be here until tomorrow. Toothless said as he licked his lips. Are you serious? Stormfly exclaimed angrily before shooting some spines into the rock wall. You two must be really tired. How about we'll keep an eye out for anyone while you take a nap? Hiccup offered as Astrid smiled. Thanks. She said before finding a soft spot of grass and laying down, Stormfly curling up around her as Hiccup and Toothless took off. Man, it's a nice day. Hiccup said as they flew through the puffy white clouds. I know, right? It's days like this when I wonder what you humans do on days like this. He said as Hiccup shrugged. I dunno. For most people they'd be brawling or going for long runs. But for me, I'd always walk to the same cliff and just stare at the sky. And maybe draw a bit. He said as Toothless looked up at him and smiled a bit. You really are different from the rest of your tribe. He said as Hiccup smiled and nodded. Yep. And now, I'm happy about it. He admitted as Toothless laughed. Yeah, if you didn't look like non-threatening I would have killed you the second we landed on that island. Toothless said as Hiccup smiled and rolled his eyes before they noticed a few people walking in the general direction of the cove. Hey Toothless, can you swing down a bit closer? He asked as Toothless descended as Hiccup gasped, realizing that the people were the other teens. Who are those people? Toothless asked quietly. The same ones we had that run-in with yesterday night. Hiccup whispered as they looked at each other before flying out of sight. Underscore 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 underscore. Let me go. Sky snarled as she tried to smash the dragon-proof cage she was sealed in. It's no use, girl, nothing a dragon can do will destroy this metal. A voice said as Sky whipped around to see a few dragons sitting sadly in some other cages. She notices a green and purple rumble horn as it get her attention. Name's Skull Crusher, and that's Grump, Shine, and Jewel. The rumble horn introduced as he gestured to a bronze hot purple, a yellow and white Nada, and a purple and blue hobble grunt. Where are we? Sky asked as Skull Crusher looked around. None of us are ever sure. I have been captive here for over 2 years, which is really long by dragon hunter standards. And then Grump was captured about a year ago. Shine, about 6 months, and Jewel about 2. He explained as Sky looked down sadly. So, how'd you get stuck here? Shine asked as she ruffles her wings a bit. Yeah, and what's your name? Jewel added. Oh, I'm Sky Scale, but you can just call me Sky, and I got shot down after my rider and I were flying. Why you have a rider? They all exclaimed at once as Sky sheepishly nodded. Yeah, her name is Brenna. She accidentally trusted one of the spies that works for these hunters, Talon. Anyways, we were shot down by the archer's excellent aim. She was thrown off my back and I'm so worried if she's alright. She muttered as Skull Crusher looked at her in shock. But you were thrown in last night at like 2 am. He exclaimed. That means that you were shot down in the middle of the night. A Night Fury. Jewel added in pure shock as Grump lifted up his lazy head and glared at the others. I'm trying to sleep. He grumbled as Sky's eyes widened in shock. Wait a minute. Skullcrusher, have you not flown for over 2 years? She exclaimed as Skullcrusher nodded sadly. I can barely even stretch out my wings in here. He said as Sky looked up at the ceiling, hearing the probably drunken men laughing and partying at her capture. I'm going to get us all out of here, I promise. She declared as they all chuckled a bit. Like Scully over there hasn't made that promise before. There's no way out. These hunters are armed to the teeth and almost never let their guard down unless their leader Viggo deems safe. And he is the smartest person probably in the world. Shine said in defeat as Sky shook her head. No, you don't understand. I overheard the 2 other riders that I hang out with say that these hunters, they are heading straight for the island of Berk. And they'll be there, ready to take these hunters down. Underscore 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 underscore. Brenna awoke with a groan as her eyes fluttered open, expecting to see the sandy beach where she crashed the previous night, but instead was in a room filled with warm blue-green light. Ah! She yelped as she tumbled out of a makeshift bed and onto a stone floor. Ow! She moaned before noticing her probably sprained arm was in a sling. Who did this? Good, you're awake. A voice said as a woman walked into the room holding a piece of bread. A warm smile on her face as she handed Brenna the bread. Who are you? She asked in shock as the woman smiled. That's not important. The important thing is, I found you washed up on that beach. How did you end up there? The woman asked as Brenna's eyes darkened. Dragon hunters. She hissed as the woman's turquoise eyes became almost impossibly wide. Wait, are you talking about Drago Bloodfist? She asked, rage starting to shake her voice as Brenna shook her head. No. I think their leaders' names are Riker and Viggo. She explained as the woman calmed down. Wait a minute, if you were injured by dragon hunters, does that mean you ride a dragon? The woman asked, starting to get more and more excited. Yeah, I ride a Night Fury with a small group of vigilantes, just south of the archipelago. Brenna explained as the woman got even more excited. There are other dragon riders. Who are they? She asked as Brenna was about to say, until she remembered what happened last time when she was too eager to trust. How do I know you are to be trusted? Last time I told an innocent stranger our names, he turned out to be a dragon hunter. Brenna exclaimed angrily as the woman smiled again and gently took her hand. Come with me. She said as the 2 started to walk through some tunnels, the flapping of wings catching Brenna's attention as the woman crawled through a slightly small space before giving Brenna her hand as she hoisted her up. Whoa! Brenna muttered, eyes wide as she looked at the sight in front of her, thousands of dragons, big and small, all flying around the gigantic cavern, an enormous alpha at the center of it all. Now do you trust me? The woman asked with a light smile as a dragon with 4 wings flew down next to them and nuzzled her. Why yeah. She said as the woman chuckled a bit. My name's Brenna, and my fellow vigilantes are Astrid with Hanada Stormfly and Hiccup with his Night Fury Toothless. She explained as the woman's breath hitched as she stumbled back a bit, the 4-winged dragon catching her with his claw. Hey, are you okay? Brenna asked in concern as a small smile tugged at the woman's lips. He's just like me. What? Brenna asked the woman in confusion as she looked at her and smiled. Has Hiccup ever talked about his mother? She asked as Brenna shook her head. No, he's never mentioned wait. He said she was killed by a Storacutter. She muttered as her eyes widened and the woman's smile turned into a sheepish grin. Vivalka Haddock. The woman said, holding out her hand as Brenna shook it. Oh my gods. You and Hiccup are totally alike. She exclaimed as Valka smiled. Thank the gods for that. It broke my heart to think he would become a dragon killer. She sighed as Brenna gave her a confused look. Wait, why didn't you go back? She asked as Valka bit her lip nervously. Because I believed they'd be safer if I did. 15 years ago I almost got Hiccup and Stoic killed. she said with a sad smile. Oh, so you stayed away for Hiccup's protection? Brenner asked as Valka nodded. Yes. But off of that topic, your Night Fury was taken by some hunters. She said as Brenner nodded. Yes, and I'm afraid they are heading for Burke. She said angrily as Valka looked at the four-winged dragon, who shook its head. Val, no. Do you have any idea what Stoich'll do to me if he sees me? I'm a goner, he exclaimed as Valka gave him a sad look. Please Cloud Jumper, she pleaded as the dragon sighed before gesturing to his back. Wait, how will I get to Burke? Brenner asked as Valka bit her lip before looking over to see a beautiful jade monstrous nightmare snoozing by a rock pillar. Jade, will you come over here? She asked as the dragon got up and yawned. Yeah Valka, she asked as Valka gestured for Brenner to walk over to Jade. Hey, are you sure? Is it loyal to train another dragon? She asked as Valka shrugged. Sure, you can never have enough dragon friends, she said with a light chuckle as Brenner held out her hand, which Jade leaned her snout into. I need your help, fly me to Burke, she said as Jade lowered her head and Brenner mounted her back before they took off. Underscore 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 Astrid, Snotlout, Fishlegs, and the twins. About a minute away, Hiccup warned as he landed in the cove and Astrid groaned before snapping up. What? She exclaimed as Hiccup shushed her as they heard voices. Hey! Did you hear that? Snotlout exclaimed from somewhere in the trees above. Get in that cave, now! Hiccup Whisper yelled as he gestured to a nearby cave. They all instantly sprinted for it as the 14s emerged from the tree line, noticing Hiccup crawling in very quick as he pulled down his new hood. Hey! I know you're down there, Dragon Rider. What did you do with Astrid? Snotlout demanded as Hiccup pressed himself up against the wall as Stormfly and Toothless hid Astrid with their wings. Yeah. Where is she? Ruffnut added as they found a tunnel that led to the bottom as Hiccup drew his bow and nocked an arrow. Hiccup no. Astrid whispered, but Hiccup ignored her as they started to walk closer and closer. I don't like this. Why can't we just go get Stoic? Fishlegs asked nervously as they walked within 50 feet of the cave and Hiccup aimed. No. Astrid screamed as they all snapped up. Astrid. Snotlout asked in shock before charging towards the cave and Hiccup shot an arrow that knocked off his helmet as a warning before Toothless snarled. Back away. He warned as he stuck his head out of the cave, Hiccup standing up and putting a hand on his head. Run. Fishlegs yelped as they all raced back towards the village. We probably only have an hour, that will give us a really good head start. No. We have to stay here and wait for the hunters. Hiccup said as Astrid's jaw dropped. But Hiccup, if they get your dad and the rest of the village then? She trailed off. Then we'll have to fight them and the dragon hunters, I know. But we can't leave. Stormfly could never hold up flying all the way back to the nest. And besides, even if we do miraculously make it, the hunters could follow us. Also, if they wait for the hunters to get here to attack us, then we will probably have a lot more time to think of something. He said as Astrid looked at him sadly. So we're just sitting ducks right now? She asked. Yeah. Hiccup said as he slung his bow over his shoulder and mounted Toothless. We're gonna go see how far the hunters are from Burke. We should be back in about 20 minutes. He said before taking off. Oh gods, this is a suicide mission. Astrid muttered. But Hiccup will have a plan. He always has a plan. Stormfly tried to reassure as Astrid sat down on a rock and sighed. Underscore 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 underscore. You will make that chieftain very happy. Viggo whispered to Sky, who snarled at him. You deserve to die, you rotten son of a bitch. She snapped as Viggo chuckled as pulled out his sword, making the other dragons cower back as Sky snarled again. You might want to calm down. Or I will be wearing your skull as a helmet. He threatened as Sky charged a plasma blast, but Viggo turned around and threw water at her head. A wet dragon head can't light its fire, he said menacingly before walking away, Sky still glaring at him. It takes guts to stand up to Viggo like that. Skullcrusher commented. Yeah, that was beyond brave, Jewel said as Sky turned away. But it doesn't make a difference, Sky muttered as she turned away sadly, looking outside through a crack in the wood before noticing a small black dot in the distance, which got bigger and bigger before she gasped and stumbled back in her cage as Winter came flying towards the hunter ship. Winter, what are you doing here? She snapped as Winter looked around nervously. I snuck out. You, and Toothless, and Hiccup have been gone for over a day and I started to get worried, Winter explained as the other dragons craned their necks to see what was happening. Winter, you need to go. These dragon hunters will kill you, Sky said as she gestured for her to leave. No. If you or Toothless get hurt I won't be able to forgive myself, Winter said as she fired up a plasma blast and tried to break a hole in the boat, but that only made noise that caught the attention of the dragon hunters, who noticed her and used a net to catch her. Winter. No. Sky screamed as Winter started to bawl and frantically tried to escape the netting. Shit, 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 she muttered as she started to pace around the cage. Okay, what just happened? Shine asked as Sky put her head in her paws and roared angrily. You wanna know what happened? My mate's little sister just got herself kidnapped and now she's gonna get seriously hurt, she snapped. Hiccup should not have been her role model, Sky stated angrily under her breath. Wait, there are other Night Furies? Skullcrusher asked in shock. Yeah, there's a whole island full of them, she said, calming down a bit. Really? So doesn't that mean that you could, I don't know, call for backup? Jewel said as Sky gave her a really look. You do realize that it's like a 10-hour flight? There's no way I could signal them for help, she said as one of the hunters walked down to the cages with Winter in his hands before he opened up a new cage and tossed her in roughly. Winter, Sky yelped as she snarled at the hunter before looking over at Winter in concern and noticed a good-sized cut across her cheek. Sky, she whimpered as Sky looked at her sadly. What, honey? She asked as gently as she could as Winter put a paw on the cut and cried a bit more as a murderous expression spread over Sky's face. We are going to destroy those hunters when we get to Berk, she snarled as they felt a jolt and the boat slowed to a halt. We're here. Underscore 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 underscore. They're here, Toothless exclaimed in shock as Hiccup shook his head in disbelief. No, we should have had at least 2 or 3 hours to make a plan, he stuttered nervously as they flew back to the cove. Guys, the hunters are here, Hiccup said solemnly. Well, do you have a plan? Stormfly asked as Hiccup shook his head. Suuuu, basically we're screwed, Astrid said as Hiccup nodded. Unless we can come up with an amazing plan within, probably 45 minutes, then yes. Do you have any ideas? Hiccup asked as Toothless perked up. I think I might have one. Get the Night Furies out of the ship, Riker hissed as Sky snarled and looked behind her at the other dragons. See you on the outside, she said sadly as the dragons watched in terror as Sky and Winter were brought up to the deck, where cheering erupted from the docks. No, Skullcrusher sighed as he slumped down against the cage. Skull, we need to have faith that Sky will come back with her mate, Shine said as Skullcrusher turned away and looked out of a crack in the wood. Yeah, but what if they don't? Huh? My pack abandoned me when I needed them the most, how do I know this Toothless character won't do the same thing? He snapped. Skullcrusher. Jewel trailed off sadly. I just don't want Sky to get her heart broken, and then cut out by some lunatic Viking who thinks she killed his son. Even though it isn't even the same dragon that took him away in the first place, he exclaimed. You really do need to have more faith in other dragons, sure, Your pack didn't treat you well in your time of need, but Night Furies are fiercely loyal and stop at nothing to protect the ones they love. Grump explained with a yawn as Skullcrusher looked down in thought. Underscore 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 underscore. The devil. Stoic snarled as he looked at Sky, slightly impressed that the dragon hunters caught a Night Fury. The Night Fury is very protective of the hatchling, we think it might be its own. Vigo explained as he gestured for Talon to come over. But the one who made this whole capture possible was Talon, who went undercover with 3 rogue riders and found out their flight routines, so all we had to do is be in the right place at the right time. He said as Talon bit his lip. As much as he hated Hiccup and Astrid, Brenna was kind and caring to him, and he wanted so bad to just tell them it was the wrong dragon, that Toothless was still out there, but for some strange reason, he couldn't do it. The rider radicalized 2 other innocent Vikings. But he couldn't even spare my son. Your rider is really the devil. He snarled as Sky put a wing around Winter and snarled back. Hiccup sure doesn't take after you. She said sarcastically before looking down at Winter with a smirk, Hiccup's a lot better looking. She whispered as Winter giggled, but she abruptly stopped and it turned into a scream as she saw Stoic walking towards them, axe raised as Sky's eyes turned to slits. You may kill me, but you will never touch Winter. She growled. The rider. A voice screamed as everyone's heads whipped around to see the teens racing down towards the docks. Hiccup's arrow clutched in Snotlout's hand as they stopped right in front of Stoic, who turned away from Sky as she let out a sigh of relief. What? Stoic exclaimed as he turned his attention away from the Night Furies and onto the teens. We saw the rider, sir. He was backed up by 2 other dragons. 1 Night Fury and 1 Deadly Nadder. Fishlegs piped up. Yeah. And I think the rider has Astrid captive on the island. Snotlout blurted out as gasps erupted from the crowd and Riker angrily grabbed Talon by the arm and yanked him to the side. You told us this was the rider's dragon. He hissed as Talon stuttered in fear. Well, it is one of the rider's dragon. He stuttered as Riker grabbed him by the throat harshly. I don't give a damn about another riding dragon, I want the rider's dragon. He snarled as Talon tried to pry his hands off his neck. We need to get into the forest and find the rider. Stoic declared as Riker looked at him before squeezing Talon's neck tighter and then throwing him to the ground. I'll deal with you when this is all over. He growled before giving orders to a few hunters, who then ran over to Sky and Winter and started to drag them towards the kill ring. Toothless, where are you? Sky asked nervously as they were thrown into a cage. Underscore 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 underscore. Are you sure this is gonna work? Hiccup asked nervously as he and Toothless hovered over the thin clouds and looked down at the blurred Vikings. Probably. He said quickly as Hiccup gave him a shocked and nervous look as they dove down and shot past right above the Vikings and dragon hunters. It's them. One Viking exclaimed as Stoic instantly ran after them. I'm coming for you, rider. He snarled as the other warriors tried to keep up. Hiccup, I probably should have told you this earlier, but your dad might get hurt in the process of this plan. Toothless said sheepishly. What? Hiccup exclaimed in shock as Toothless whipped around and shot a weak plasma blast at Stoic, who tumbled back at the still powerful blast. Dad! Hiccup yelped as Toothless started to fly faster and everyone stared at them in confusion. Did he just scream Dad? Vigo asked as he turned to face Stoic, who got up, slightly shaken. And why did THA sound like Hiccup? Gobber asked as Stoic stared in the direction Hiccup and Toothless sped off. Get that dragon and its rider, I need to know who that man is. Stoic said as he gripped his axe angrily, that couldn't possibly be Hiccup, he's been dead for over a month, and even if he were alive, he'd come back, right? underscore 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 underscore. How could you shoot my dad like that? Hiccup snapped as he and Toothless landed in the cove. Well, I knew you wouldn't go along with the plan if I told you. Now for phase 2, Stormfly. Toothless yelled as Hiccup continued to grumble to himself and Stormfly emerged from the cave with Astrid on her back. Okay, so just to get this straight, you want us to free all the dragons from the hunter's ship? Stormfly said. Exactly, but you better hurry, I don't know how long it will be until they get back. Toothless said as he gestured to the sky. Astrid, here. Hiccup said as he threw Astrid his hood. You better not be seen. She scolded. And you can't either, now go. He urged as they took off in the direction of the docks quickly. Now we wait. Toothless said as he and Hiccup both looked in the direction Stormfly and Astrid went, praying everything would go just fine. Underscore 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 underscore. Astrid and Stormfly quietly landed on the hunter ship and crawled down the ladder to the cages. Who are you two? Skullcrusher questioned angrily. It's okay, we're here to help. Stormfly assured as Astrid jumped up and freed all of them from their cages and then perked up, getting an idea. We need your help defeating these hunters. She said. Oh, why, isn't Sky's knight in shining hide already killing them as we speak? Skullcrusher said sarcastically as Stormfly's eyes widened in fear. Wait, Sky was caught by hunters. Then where's Brenna? She asked, fear creeping into her voice as she looked at Astrid nervously. Stormfly, what's wrong? She asked, biting her lip nervously. We need to get out of here. Come on, Hiccup and Toothless won't be secured forever. Stormfly said as she grabbed Hiccup and flew out, the other dragons following her close behind. Flight! Jewel exclaimed as they all laughed and flew around in the air happily, stretching their wings and tasting the wind as they flew towards the kill ring. Vikings! Astrid screamed as Stormfly jolted back. But the other dragons weren't as lucky and the hunters shot 4 arrows straight at the freed dragons. No! Stormfly yelped, but then, in a blur of green and orange, the arrows were disintegrated and Brenna whooped in triumph on top of Jade, who roared in delight as Astrid and Stormfly stared at them in shock. This is for spraining my arm. She screamed as Jade swooped down and shot at a few hunters as they quickly tried to knock some more arrows, but the other dragons dove down and started to attack as well. Brenna. How who what? Astrid stuttered as Brenna steered Jade next to Stormfly. It's a long story, I'll tell you right after we get my dragon. She said quickly before flying towards the arena, but Riker spotted them from the corner of his eye. Oh no you don't. He muttered before shooting an arrow perfectly into Stormfly's side. Off. Stormfly no. She screamed in terror as Stormfly started to go down. Astrid. Brenna yelped as Riker shot Jade as well. I feel funny. Jade said, a bit spacey as they both crashed into the village and people started to swarm them. Stormfly. Astrid screamed as a few people dragged her and Jade away. Remove her hood. Viggo commanded as a few hunters walked up behind her and tore off her hood, making all the villagers gasp in shock. Astrid. Stoic asked in shock as Astrid looked around frantically before sighing and standing up. Yes. It's me. She sighed as the village erupted in murmurs and Mr. and Mrs. Horferson walked up to their daughter in SHPCK. Mom, Dad, I'm so sorry. She muttered as her father smacked her on the head. You're not my daughter, Cheese would never betray us. He snarled as Astrid's eyes became wide and her jaw dropped a bit, was she just disowned? I can't believe you. Mrs. Horferson added angrily before stomping off as Astrid stumbled back a bit in shock. Take them to the dungeon to be interrogated. Stoic commanded before shooting Astrid a dirty glare and walking away. underscore 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 underscore. W. Who are you? Hiccup asked nervously as Valka looked up from Toothless, who she had made unconscious from a little trick she learned years ago. A dragon hunter. He stuttered as Valka gave him a slightly offended look from under her helmet. No, of course not. She said before taking a deep breath and removing her helmet. But I am someone you wouldn't know, you were only a babe. She sighed as Hiccup gave her a confused look. W. Who? He trailed off quietly as Valka placed a gentle hand on his cheek. But a mother never forgets. She muttered as Hiccup's jaw dropped. Mom. Talk. Stoic snarled as he glared at Astrid and Brenner, who were both tied up, laying in a jail cell pathetically. No. Astrid said defiantly. Brenner started, but Astrid cut her off. Leave the rider alone, he's not the bad guy here. She added as Stoic's eyes narrowed. Not the bad guy. That man killed my son in cold blood. He said coolly as Brenner shook her head. No really. The hunters are. Let us and our dragons go and we'll prove it. She begged. You are not a part of this. Horferson, how could you? You were once the star student of dragon training, seeking vengeance for the death of your uncle, you swore to protect Berk at all costs. And now you've turned your back against us. Stoic hissed. I'm trying to protect Berk now. The hunters are going to take over Berk. Astrid exclaimed. Please sir, the rider means no harm and neither do we. Just let us free and we'll prove that we mean no harm. Brenner added as Stoic scoffed. I bet that's what the rider brainwashed you to think. He snarled as Astrid and Brenner looked at each other in shock. Brainwashed? Chief, are you kidding me? Hi he. Astrid corrected as Brenner gave her a nervous look, he showed us that we don't have to fight dragons. That they can be our friends. She said. That sounds like no. Dragons killed my entire family. Do you expect me to believe they are good creatures? He sputtered. Yes. She said flatly as Stoic put a hand on his axe and Brenner's breath hitched. Astrid no. She screamed as Stoic grabbed his axe and swung it at Astrid, but Brenner knocked her out of the way, getting a cut right across the cheek, blood tricked down her face and she let out a cry of pain. Brenner. Astrid yelped as she tried to scooch towards her. What the hell was that for? She snarled as Stoic held out his axe, which had Brenner's blood glistening on the end of the blade. Tell me who the rider is and why he killed Hiccup, or else you'll be getting more than a cut. Stoic threatened as Astrid maintained her defiant glare. Underscore 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 underscore. Okay, so let me get this straight, when I was a baby you were taken away by a dragon and then spent the last 15 years living with them. Hiccup exclaimed as Valka nodded sheepishly. Are you upset? She stuttered as Hiccup looked at the ground and sighed. I don't know. A little. He muttered as he kicked the dirt. Oh, I'm so sorry Hiccup. Valka sighed as she cupped Hiccup's cheek gently as he looked up at her. See, can we start over? Can you give me another chance? I had no idea you would turn out just like me. She said as Hiccup looked over at Toothless, who shrugged. Hey, not my mom. He said as Hiccup shot him an annoyed look before looking back over at Valka. I dunno, do you promise not to run away again? He asked in a with small smile as Valka sighed in relief and hugged him. Oh, thank you so much. I will make it up to you, I swear. She said as Hiccup leaned into her hug, slightly shocked by the gesture. Can I ask you something? He asked as he pulled away and Valka nodded. Can you help us with this plan that we're doing? It's basically going to wipe out the dragon hunters and free all of the dragons. My friend Astrid is already doing phase 2, even though she's been gone for a bit longer than I thought she would be. Hiccup said as Toothless sniffed the air curiously. Vikings, guys watch out. Toothless yelped as he tackled Hiccup and Valka to protect them as a few dragon root arrows flew towards them and embedded themselves into Toothless' wing, making him fall unconscious as Valka scrambled to put on her helmet. Toothless! Hiccup yelped as another arrow flew by and hit Cloudjumper, who was already dozing in the sun after a long flight. Toothless became completely limp and his wing slumped down, leaving Hiccup and Valka exposed as the hunters readied 2 more arrows with a worse intent than knocking them out. No! Valka screamed as she jumped in front of Hiccup and the arrows lodged themselves into her clad armor, little bits of blood seeping through as Valka shakily pointed towards the exit. Run! She muttered before flopping down on the ground, making Hikyo gasp before he took a deep breath and bolted towards the exit. Son of a bitch, son of a bitch, son of a bitch. He kept repeating over and over as he sprinted for the little opening in the rock wall, which he easily slipped through. Get that boy! A familiar voice screamed as Riker pushed his way through the hunters and attempted to chase after Hiccup, but he had a good 100-meter advantage on him and Hiccup raced into the trees without a trace. Riker, what should we do with them? One of the hunters asked as Ryla looked down at them. Take them to the chief. The other rider is now a prisoner. He declared as Valka lifted her head up a bit and a small smile slid across her face. Hiccup made it. She muttered softly as the hunters picked her up and hauled her off towards the village. Underscore 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 underscore. What should I do? Hiccup screamed as the sky as he walked up to a cliff and sat on the edge of it sadly, staring out to sea with a distraught expression. This is all such a mess. He muttered before grabbing a rock and hurling it out towards the sea and it disappeared beneath the waves. Well, you could have just called for help, son of chief. A voice said as Hiccup whipped around to see a woman with long very light blue hair that hung freely down her back and the bluest eyes he's ever seen. She wore a suit of what looked like white dragon scales and a crystal crown on her head. Who are you? Hiccup asked as shocked as the woman walked over to him and sat down, instantly cooling the air around him. Grayscale and Sky probably told you about me, I'm Snowflake. She said as she held out a friendly hand, which Hiccup shook as a chill shot down his spine. Oh, sorry about that. She apologized sheepishly as Hiccup shook his head. It's okay, but how did you know I was on berk and that I needed help? Hiccup asked as Snowflake looked back out at sea before tucking a piece of hair behind her ear. Because I just always get a bad feeling whenever one of my nest mates is in trouble. She explained. Wait, but how did you get here? He asked as Snowflake smirked, still looking out at the ocean before she stood up, and jumped off the cliff. No. Hiccup screamed as he tried to grab her, but it was too late. He started to panic and hyperventilate in terror before a white blur shot up the cliff, making him stumble back as a white night fury with extremely vivid blue eyes landed next to him. Hi Hiccup. Now let's go save your mom and Grayscale. She said as Hiccup took another deep breath before jumping onto Snowflake's back and they took off. Underscore 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 underscore. Another rider. Stoic exclaimed as Riker roughly threw Valka into the cell next to Astrid and Brenner's. Valka was caught. Damn it. Brenner hissed under her breath. Yes, but that's not all. Hunters. Riker snapped as a few hunters ran in, pulling Toothless in a dragon-proof cage as he snarled at them before gasping. Brenner. What are you doing here? He asked in shock as she looked around cautiously before scooching to the edge of the cell. Sky was caught by the hunters a few days ago while I was deserted on an island. Thank the gods Hiccup's alive mom saw me and saved my life. She whispered as Toothless' jaw dropped. Sky was sea captured. Toothless stuttered, all the blood draining from his face before he roared in absolute fury. I'm gonna rip you to shreds. He snarled as he shot a plasma blast through the bars, which hit Riker in the chest, making him fall unconscious. Get some water. One of the hunters exclaimed as they grabbed the nearest bucket of water and threw it on Toothless' head as he growled a bit more. Nice shot, Tooth. Astrid commented as the hunters carted him away and Viggo rounded a corner and spotted his brother laying on the ground. "Kill that dragon now," he snarled as he grasped Riker's wrist, waiting for a little sign of life, but there was none. "Riker." Viggo trailed off sadly as he closed his eyes and made sure no tears would fall out. "Let me slaughter it brutally," he snarled as Astrid ran up and shook the prison bars. "No!" she screamed desperately as Stoic finally turned away from Valka, his angry glare now turned slightly softer as he bent down next to Viggo. "I want to kill the beast," he hissed as Stoic sighed and nodded. Sure, he wanted revenge for Hiccup, but he had already gotten a month or so to let a very small amount of the rage to subside. Viggo had not. "No. You can't do this," Brenna begged as she ran up to the bars as well. "That dragon is as good as dead by now and nothing you can say or do will change that." Stoic hissed as a few Birkins and hunters picked up Riker and hauled him off. "Chief, please." Toothless was just angry about his mate being captured. Astrid pleaded, but Stoic had already gone, leaving Astrid, Brenna, Valka, and Viggo by themselves. "The art of the kill is one of my favorite things. Remember that when you hear the pained screams of all your dragons being tortured," Viggo said coolly before walking off. "When I get my hands on him, he won't ever see the light of day again." Astrid screamed as she shook with rage. "Astrid. Screaming won't solve anything, we just need to keep our heads on and think of a way out," Brenna said. "I've fought Drago Bloodfist for almost 15 years and yet this is the most helpless I've ever felt." Valka sighed. "Well, if you want to get out of here, use the magic word," a voice said as they all craned their necks to see Talon walk out of the shadows, playing with a key in his hands. "Talon!" Brenna exclaimed as she ran to the bars and her face lit up as Astrid glared at him. "What do you want?" she snarled as Talon held up his key. "To get you three out of here. Toothless isn't going to save himself," he said as Astrid gave him a suspicious look. "Why the sudden change in heart?" she asked as Talon sighed. "Because I was the one in charge of putting those two Night Furies in their cells and they just looked so helpless. So scared. I suddenly understood why you all sympathize with dragons. Because they have emotions, feelings. Just like you and me," he explained before opening up the two cells and Brenna and Valka walked out while Astrid still sat on the floor. "You're not going to save your dragon by pouting," Talon said as he held out his hand, which Astrid begrudgingly grabbed as he helped her up before walking in the direction of the dragon cages. Underscore 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 underscore. "Stormfly?" Astrid asked quietly as she used Talon's key to open up a cage that housed Stormfly, Jewel, Jade, and Shine. "Astrid." Stormfly exclaimed happily as she ran up and licked her cheek, making Astrid laugh. "We need to get out of here to go save Toothless and Sky," she explained before throwing the key to Valka, who opened up the cage containing Cloudjumper, Skullcrusher, and Grump. "Talon, do you want me to teach you how to train a dragon?" Brenna asked as Talon froze. "And no, training dragons is way above my comfort zone," he assured as Brenna smiled and rolled her eyes before excitedly grabbing Talon's hand and eyeing the dragons before grinning as she walked up to Jade. "Jade, this is Talon, Jade. I feel like you two would like each other," she said before stepping back with a charming smile on her face. What?" Talon exclaimed in shock as Jade nuzzled him. "Brenna seems to trust you and I trust her. I like you human," she said as Talon took a deep breath and held out his hand, which Jade leaned into. "Do you trust him now?" Brenna asked with a smirk as Astrid shot her a glare before sighing. "Let's just get to the arena before it's too late," she said before jumping onto Stormfly and swiftly exiting the dungeon, Valka following close behind along with the other dragons. "I need a ride," Brenna said as she jumped onto Jade's back and gestured for Talon to get on with her, which he did hesitantly before they two left the dungeon. underscore 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 underscore. Toothless snarled as he was wheeled into the arena and thrown into one of the cages. Damn it! He hissed as the door was slammed shut. G. Gray. A voice cracked as Toothless whipped around to see Sky, wrapped around Winter protectively. Sky! He screamed as he tried to escape, relief in his voice as Sky tried to stand up, but her own chains held her back. Toothless! Winter exclaimed as she ran from Sky's grasp and crawled onto Toothless' cage. Winter! Not you too! Do Mom and Dad know you're here? Did you sneak out? Toothless scolded. I was scared you and Hiccup were hurt. Winter whimpered as Toothless' expression softened. Hiccup's fine, but I'm the one all those men want. Toothless said as Winter gasped and whimpered. Why do they want you? She asked with a wavering voice as Toothless and Sky both sighed. Well Winter, you know how Toothless took Hiccup from a village? Sky asked as Winter nodded. Well, this was the village I took him from. Toothless explained as Winter's eyes started to well up. I is the big man who almost killed me going to kill you? She asked sadly as Toothless nodded solemnly. It's been a good run. He sighed as Sky shook her head furiously. No. You're not going down. Not if I have a say in it. She snarled as Toothless shook his head. No. As soon as they open that door, you and Winter make a break for it. There's no point in trying to save me. He sighed as Sky bit her lip and looked away before starting to sob and nuzzling Toothless through the bars. Remember our dream about having hatchlings? Toothless asked as Sky continued to cry, make sure they have a good daddy. He choked as Winter whimpered and Toothless looked over at her, and Winter, you were my favorite sibling. Toothless. Winter sobbed as they heard thunder rolling and rain splash onto the ground before the door opened and Viggo appeared, accompanied by Stoic, Gobber, and a few hunters. Sky. Winter. Run. Toothless screamed as Sky and Winter made a mad dash for the exit, but they were struck by some arrows and fell unconscious. Get it out of the cage, a bad storm is coming. Viggo hissed as they wheeled him out into the open before the cell closed and rain bounced off the cage as lightning cracked in the distance, but that didn't waver that village's expectant faces. Everyone showed up, watching excitedly as Toothless whimpered and Viggo unsheathed his sword. This is for Riker. He snarled, opening up the cage door, and Toothless fell out, chains constricting his feet and wings so he couldn't fly away. He then raised his sword and everyone watched anxiously, until... Noo-oo-oo-oo. A scream pierced through the storm as lightning flashed and Snowflake burst from the clouds, Hiccup balancing on her back as everyone gasped in shock before Snowflake shot an icy blast between Viggo and Toothless before landing on the ground, Hiccup jumping off her back and glaring at Viggo angrily, making the villagers murmur in shock. Snow, get Toothless out of here. He commanded as Snowflake nodded and turned into a human, and Hiccup grabbed his sword from his belt and lunged at Viggo. Don't you even think about touching my dragon. Hiccup snarled as Viggo easily dodged him before swinging his sword, making Hiccup duck, the sword barely grazing a bit of flying hair, cutting it off in the process. Not bad, for a scrawny boy like yourself. Viggo said as he hit Hiccup with the hilt of his sword and knocked the breath out of him, using this to his advantage as he punched Hiccup in the face, making him yelp in pain before Viggo tripped him and put a foot on his chest. Any last words, Dragon Rider? He asked as Hiccup looked over and smirked. Yep. Another 50 years worth. He said as Viggo slowly turned around to see Astrid, Brenna, Talon, and Valka sitting atop their dragons, the other dragons standing right next to them, glaring at Viggo as Winter flew up and perched herself on Brenna's shoulder as she jumped off of Jade and onto Sky. Riders. Attack. She screamed as they all let out war cries and rushed Viggo, but then were stopped by the archers pointing their damned arrows at them. Shoot. Viggo commanded as they all shot their arrows at the dragons, and the riders. No. Hiccup screamed as they all fell to the ground, Toothless and Snowflake included, and Viggo raised his sword. Finally, this is for you, why. Viggo was cut off by Stoic smacking into him at full force, sending him flying and hitting the arena wall with a thud. Hiccup, it can wait. Hiccup assured with a small smile before they both looked back over at Viggo, who was now accompanied by almost the entire hunter army. Now it's your move, Stoic. Give the boy to me, and we'll leave Berk in peace. Keep him, and your little island is our new base of operations. Viggo said as Stoic glared at him, and Hiccup sighed and started to walk over to him, but was yanked back violently. Hiccup. What are you doing? Stoic snapped. I'm not worth the entire island, Dad. All these people will be killed. The hunter army is skilled enough to take down a Night Fury at midnight. Strong enough to make whole packs of dragons horrified. Hiccup countered as he tried to walk over to Viggo again, but Stoic kept a firm hand on his arm. I'm not going to lose you. Not again. He sighed as Hiccup's expression softened. So is it the boy or the island? Viggo yelled as Stoic shook his head defiantly. I made a promise to protect him at all costs, and I've already lost him once. I'm not going to lose him again. He snarled, Hiccup. Hiccup. A voice from the crowd squeaked as all eyes locked on Fishlegs, who whimpered nervously, and Snotlout looked at him, almost enviously, before saying, Hiccup. Hiccup. Gobber said as he changed his arm from a hammer to an axe. Hiccup. The twins exclaimed as almost everyone started to say Hiccup defiantly, making Viggo gasp before grinning. Okay, you all made your choice, hunters attack. He commanded.